who's been making the case that the state has been cooperating in transfers of immigrants with criminal records to ICE for deportation later. So all of these folks are before this committee. It's chaired by Rand Paul, who's been somewhat skeptical of the way that the federal government has carried out this as well, because there's been some warrant issues. And Rand Paul is a constitutionalist, and he is not very happy about the idea that administrative rather than judicial warrants are being used in some of these circumstances. And it's been this kind of week. On Tuesday, there were various members of the immigration hierarchy that were before a House committee in Washington, and they were talking all about what's happened in Minnesota, all about the two Minnesotans who were killed during this in January, Renee Macklin Good and Alex Preddy. And then yesterday you had Pam Bondi before another House committee, the Judiciary Committee, and she was asked several questions about what's going on with the prosecutions of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, as well as why the investigators, the federal investigators, have shut Minnesota out of the investigations into the two slain Minnesotans. So a lot has been happening in Washington related to Minnesota this week.
And of course, for folks who don't remember, Don Lemon, of course, former CNN news anchor, and Georgia Fort is a locally based independent journalist, both arrested during this anti-ICE protest at a St. Paul church a few weeks ago.
They were there to cover it, and they even had interviews with parishioners and the pastors of the church, but they were kind of caught up with the other protesters and being charged, saying that they were interfering with worship.
Right, and I believe they are to appear tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes. And another interesting facet there is Don Lemon has hired Joe Thompson, who people might remember the name because he's been the top Minnesota fraud prosecutor in the federal government, but he resigned in part because of the way that the immigration action played out and the investigations that were being pushed by the Department of Justice into Becca Good, which is Renee Macklin Good's spouse.
We should also say, and maybe back this whole thing up, this has been 2 months that we have been really
75 days.
Yeah, it's been quite intense, obviously, and this whole thing began around fraud. I mean, and it's true. I mean, there is a large problem with fraud in state human services programs, and that caught the attention of the feds.
Yeah, this Operation Metro Surge is what the federal government called it, and it began on December 1st, and about 1,000 agents were brought in, and they were mostly concentrated in areas where there are East African immigrants or people who have East African descent. Mm-hmm. So the Cedar Riverside neighborhood was a very concentrated area. And at first, a lot of folks with Somali heritage were very on edge about this. But as kind of more agents came in, it has spread across the Twin Cities and to other parts of the state.
We've St. Cloud.
We've seen arrests in St. Cloud. We've seen in Northfield. We've seen some action in Mankato area, St. Peter area. So, I mean, it's been all over the state, and it's been really galvanizing for folks who are opposed to the way that this deportation campaign. Minnesota has kind of made national news about the way that some people have stood up to the federal government when it comes to the immigration actions.
Department of Homeland Security, of course, called this the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out. At one point, we had some 3,000 federal agents here in Minnesota.
Right. And Tom Homan, who has been on the ground here in Minnesota for now 2 weeks, this is kind of the 2-week mark, last week came out and said they're taking 700 agents out. That was what he had told people. We don't know. It's hard for us to tell. They never really revealed where these agents have been or who they are, and they've been cycling people in and out. But he had said that it would be brought down to about 2,300 if we were looking down from the peak. And a normal ICE presence in Minnesota, the people stationed here all the time, is about 150. And that's been what Democratic leaders have said. Let's just get back to that. That's one of the things that they want. They also want, obviously, the state to be involved in these investigations into the fatal shootings. That's been one of their bottom line. But they're also facing pressure from their left. They don't want to be on their left, Mayor Jacob Fry and the governor. People are worried that they're going to capitulate or give something away to the administration in order to get the agents out.
We were talking, Angela Conley, Hennepin County Commissioner, was talking yesterday along with some other officials about kind of this waiting to see what happens because ICE agents are still in the Twin Cities metro area. The plainclothes federal officers made a chaotic arrest inside the Hennepin County Government Center recently. A man had arrived for a court appearance on charges of possessing some 50 pounds of meth. He was nabbed, but the whole operation in the government center really shocked some people.
With plain clothes and no real ID marking them as agents. Yes.
Right. And of course, yesterday there was this crash pretty close to NPR headquarters here in St. Paul, outside a pretty popular coffee shop on Selby Avenue. A man was being pursued by federal agents and crashed his car, and that caused a scene as well. So there's this kind of still some tension and unease, even with these agents that have left the state.
Absolutely, and we've seen cities in Minnesota consider or even pass some ordinances trying to seek to have federal agents identify themselves or not wear masks. Obviously, there's some question as to whether those can be enforced. But this all happens at the backdrop with there's this major Department of Homeland Security funding bill in Washington that if it doesn't pass by tomorrow, that agency will shut down. So another reason why the conditions might be ripe for some sort of major announcement this morning from Tom Homan, and we'll hear when he comes up whether that's the case.
So if you're just tuning in, 8:02, we are in the midst of live special coverage. I'm Cathy Wurzer, along with our politics editor, Brian Bakst. And the special coverage, of course, is this news conference that is expected here shortly. We have a screen up here in our studio. We're watching to see when Border Czar Tom Homan walks into the room for a news conference. In the past, he's had at least 2 other news conferences.
This will be his third, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And, he's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I want to make that point that you were just getting to, is that Tom Homan hasn't come here and held a news conference every day holding up pictures of people they've taken off the streets, unlike his predecessor, Greg Bovino, who came in with uniform and at these press conferences. Tom Homan has been doing a lot behind the scenes. He's been talking with the governor, he's been talking with the mayors, he's been talking with sheriffs, he's been talking with other community officials and leaders, trying to get to some sort of resolution where everybody can feel like they got something.
Looks like they're walking in, according to our Estelle Timar Wilcox. We, of course, have this screen up, and we will have this live coverage. And, of course, we're also expecting a news conference.
I'm Tom Homan, the Border Czar for President Trump. I'm going to read a statement real quick. Then after I read the statement, I'll take questions. I'm here with Sam Molson, Director of ICE and Enforcement Mover Operations for the St. Paul Field Office. Stephen Schrank, Acting Special Agent in charge for ICE Homeland Security Investigations, and Chris Kuhn, Deputy Chief Patrol Agent for the United States Border Patrol. I'm very pleased to report that this surge operation and our work here with state and local officials to improve coordination and achieve mutual goals, as well as our efforts to address issues of concern here on the ground, have yielded the successful results we have came here for. The Twin Cities and Minnesota in general are and will continue to be much safer for the communities here because of what we have accomplished under President Trump's leadership. I previously shared with you before I got here. Before I even got here, I met with, I said I was going to meet with the governor, the AG, and the Mayor Fry, Mayor Herr, and I've done all of that. I've also met with various police chiefs and sheriffs. And one thing we all had in common was the importance of ensuring and maintaining public safety. Overall, we made a lot of progress through extensive engagement, meeting with them and other key stakeholders. And it is expected that those engagements and discussions will continue going forward in order to enhance exchange of information and more coordination. As a result of this surge operation, we have greatly reduced the number of targets for enforcement action. And many criminal aliens have been arrested and taken off the streets, including murderers, sex offenders, national security threats, gang members, and other violent criminals. Just this week, ICE arrested a criminal alien with criminal convictions for rape, acts with a child under 14 years of age with force, lewd and lascivious acts with a child under 14. ICE also arrested 2 criminal aliens with criminal sexual misconduct convictions, among other violent criminals. Through targeted enforcement operations based on reasonable suspicion and prioritizing safety and security, ICE will continue to identify, arrest, and remove illegal aliens that pose a risk to public safety, like we've done for years. And our officers will carry out those duties with professionalism, integrity, and compassion, like we've done for years. We will enforce the immigration law against all persons in the United States illegally. I want to say something about the various unfounded complaints I'm hearing about ICE enforcement operations. During the surge operation, ICE has not arrested anybody inside a hospital. We have not arrested anybody inside of a school, an elementary school. We have not arrested anybody inside a church. As a matter of fact, the only ones that disrespected the sanctuary of a church were the agitators that have been arrested and prosecuted, and so far we have 9 of them. However, those locations are not off the table. I said from day one, there's no sanctuary for a significant public safety threat or national security threat. But as far as those stories about ICE going into churches, arresting people in hospitals, it simply has not happened. And if you have a case where it happened, you let me know. Because all the digging I've done here, I can't find a single one. Under President Trump's direction, we have obtained an unprecedented level of coordination with law enforcement officials that is focused on promoting public safety across the entire state. While I don't agree with Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellis on everything, I appreciate the support the governor gives to state agencies who coordinate with us in a manner intended to promote public safety. And I appreciate the AG having an open dialogue with me. Early on, the first meeting I had, acknowledging that county jails may notify ICE of the release date of an inmate, just as long as they don't hold them past the time they would normally release them. We now have the ability to arrest criminal aliens in the safety and security of jails throughout the state at the time they're being released, like we've done in other states. I've also directed the strategic placement of officers in certain areas throughout the states that can respond quickly to sheriffs that want to release somebody and notify us. We need to be nearby so they don't hold them unnecessarily. So we worked on a strategic plan to reassign officers in those key locations. Arresting a public safety threat and the safety and security of a jail is safer for the alien, it's safer for the officer, and safer for the community. I think we all can agree on that. It requires less resources for at-large operations. It just makes sense. I'll say it again, as I've said many times, we are not asking local law enforcement to act as immigration officers. I don't want them to be immigration officers. We're the immigration officers. We just want them to be cops. We're asking law enforcement to coordinate with other law enforcement to help keep public safety risks out of the communities. We have also strengthened our existing coordination with the state to target and take custody of criminal aliens more efficiently and effectively. As a result of our efforts here, Minnesota is now less of a sanctuary state for criminals. And we are proud of the public safety threats we have removed from the criminal aliens out of the state. As I said in my first press conference a couple weeks ago, President Trump didn't send me here because the operations were being run and conducted perfectly. I came here to identify issues and implement solutions to improve our mission execution. Since that time, in order to improve target enforcement operation, I and my team here, we made personnel changes. We integrated BP with the ICE teams. We established a single unified chain of command structure. We strengthened joint intelligence and targeting capabilities. We deployed body cameras. We increased the footprint of internal affairs. We commuted zero tolerance for misconduct. President Trump also deployed me here to work with state and local officials to de-escalate the intense, volatile reactions and conflicts that have unfolded on the streets here between federal law enforcement and unlawful agitators. While working to course correct and improve how enforcement operations are being run and executed here, and even before I was sent up here, I've been saying over and over that forcibly assaulting, resisting, opposing, impeding, intimidating, or interfering with a federal law enforcement officer is a crime in violation of USC 111. It's not okay and will not be tolerated. Zero tolerance if you cross that line and put hands on a ICE officer. Not only is such activity unlawful, it is dangerous, and sadly we have seen tragic consequences. as well as adverse impacts on businesses and the communities here in the city. While the Trump administration supports everyone's First Amendment right to freedom of speech and assembly and to petition, it has to be done lawfully and peacefully. Because we will not tolerate unlawful actions committed by agitators who are just causing havoc. This is not the way to express your disagreement or try to reform federal laws. Go talk to your members of Congress if you want the laws changed in this country. Nor is doxing federal law enforcement personnel and their families. It's just not right. Enough is enough with this misguided, reckless, and shameful behavior. We don't want to see any more bloodshed. I don't want to see any more bloodshed. I pray every night for the safety of our law enforcement personnel and the safety of those in the community, whether you're here legally or illegally. I don't want to see anybody harmed. If you break the law, we're going to arrest you. We have already arrested more than 200 people for violations of USC 111. The U.S. Attorney's Office has already accepted many for prosecutions, and some are still pending. I have also received commitments from state and local law enforcement that they will respond if federal law enforcement is being impeded or assaulted. They will shut down unlawful agitator activity, including arresting agitators involved and seeing them follow through. And we're seeing them follow through on those commitments. We've seen this past weekend that the state and local law enforcement have taken action when it comes to public safety. And bless them for doing that. Since I have been here, I've repeatedly emphasized that the unlawful and violent agitator activity is unacceptable and must wind down as a condition for further drawdown of law enforcement personnel. I cannot remove law enforcement personnel while violence poses serious risk to our officers. I will not leave my officers in that position. It is worth knowing that in all my meetings and discussions since I got here, I've not heard one federal, state, local law enforcement, or judicial official, nor any member of the business or faith communities that I met with, say that ICE is an illegitimate agency that doesn't have a real mission. Quite the opposite. All I've heard is the acknowledgement that federal immigration laws passed by Congress do exist, and ICE has a legitimate responsibility to enforce those laws. ICE is a legitimate federal law enforcement agency. We're not out scouring the streets to disappear people or deny people their civil rights or due process. In addition to taking public safety threats off the street, ICE here in this state have located 3,364 missing unaccompanied alien children. Children that the last administration lost and weren't even looking for. That's because of the leadership of President Trump, these children were located. As part of the de-escalation efforts, I have called on state and local officials these past few weeks to tone down the rhetoric and denounce unlawful activities being conducted by the agitators. We don't have to agree on everything, and we definitely do not. But we all agree that the lawlessness and chaos and disruption that is occurring on the street needs to end. I want to thank safety and for directing the police to take those roadblocks down. Additionally, I want to thank Police Chief O'Hara, Sheriff Witt, and various other local law enforcement for their responsiveness and efforts to maintain law and order in the streets. We've seen a big change here in the last couple of weeks, and it's all good changes. I'm also pleased to report that we're seeing a notable decrease on unlawful agitator activity here in Minneapolis and overall throughout the state. This is great news for Minnesota communities that have been adversely impacted by the lawlessness and chaos on the street. We have what we call here QRFs, Quick Response Force, security teams, that get called out when ICE officers are out doing operations. They get into trouble if agitators get out of control. If there's a danger and public safety is at risk, these QRFs respond to help these officers get off the X and get out of that situation. I asked today when I got here, I want to know what the QRFs call-outs are, what their deployments are. I want to know every time a QRF is called out. The QRF deployments have dropped dramatically because we have less of that occurring, less of the agitator that cross that line. That is a good thing. That is a win for everybody, not just for the safety of law enforcement officers. It's a win for this community. With that, and success that has been made arresting public safety threats and other priorities since this surge operation began, as well as the unprecedented levels of coordination we have obtained from state officials and local law enforcement, I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue through the next week. We have a lot of work to do across this country to remove public safety risk who shouldn't even be in this country, and to deliver on President Trump's promise for strong border security and mass deportation. Law enforcement officers drawn down from this surge operation will either return to their duty stations or be assigned elsewhere to achieve just that. We will continue to enforce Title VIII immigration law throughout this nation. Prioritizing national security threats and public safety risks makes sense. But I'll continue to say over and over again, if you are here in the country legally, you're not exempt from our immigration laws. If we encounter you, we'll take appropriate enforcement action. For those that say we are backing down from immigration enforcement or the promise of mass deportations, you are simply wrong. Look at the data. Record number of arrests and deportations under President Trump's first year. And we'll continue that effort. Prioritizing public safety threats and national security threats doesn't mean we'll forget about everybody else. We will take action on everybody else. That's just a stone cold fact. A small footprint of personnel will remain for a period of time to close out and transition full command and control back to the field office, as well as to ensure agitator activity continues to decline, and that state and local law enforcement continue to respond to ensure officer and community safety. Additionally, federal government personnel assigned to conduct criminal investigation into the agitators, as well as the personnel assigned here for the fraud investigations, will remain in place until their work is done. I will also remain on the ground for a little longer to oversee the drawdown of this operation and ensure its success. In closing, I want to thank the leadership and senior management that I've worked with for your efforts into these issues, determine deficiencies and challenges, present solutions, and implement improvements that will benefit how operations are run and executed nationwide. God bless the men and women of ICE, men and women of the Border Patrol. Appreciate everything you've done for us. Also, with sincere gratitude, President Trump and I want to thank the men and women of ICE and CBP and partner agencies who have been assigned here during Operation Metro Surge. You achieved a great success for the Minnesota communities. Thank you to your families as well, because I know they sacrifice also. Thank you, President Trump, for your vision, as well as your support and confidence in these brave, dedicated patriots that work hard to deliver on your strong commitment to law and order, public safety, prosperity for American communities. Today, we have the most secure border in American history. We are seeing record numbers of people being arrested and deported. Your promise to make America safe again is being played out every day on the streets of this country. I've said it many times. I worked for 6 different presidents, 10 different administrations. No one has done it better than President Trump. God bless this great country. I'll take questions now.
We'll take a couple questions, no follow-ups. I'll start off with Frankie.
Yeah. Mr. Homan, as immigration enforcement continues across the country here in Minnesota as well, how do you hope to gain the trust of individuals here that have kind of been wary of seeing federal officers on the street, but let's say 6 months from now, we still have the office here, we still are enforcing immigration across the country. What do you hope things to look like, and what are you asking for the public?
Look, I just want people to look at the data on what this administration has done. You know, the number of public safety threats we removed from the streets across this country, that makes these communities safer. ICE has had an office here for decades, before it was called INS, Immigration Naturalization Service. This footprint will remain here, and they'll continue to do immigration enforcement here. But as President Trump has said from day one, we're going to prioritize the public safety threats. Again, but prioritization doesn't mean forget about everybody else. That means if you have a criminal alien here and non-criminal here, the criminal always comes first because he's the biggest threat to the communities. We're going to continue to force immigration law, but we're going to get back to the footprint here, the normal footprint here. But there will be some security teams staying here, the QRFs, until we're assured that those agitators, incidents, either stay low or further decline. I'm not going to remove everybody out of the safety of our officers, but like I said, and Operation Metro Surge is ending. And in the next week, we're going to deploy the officers here on detail back to their home stations or other areas of the country that are needed. But we're going to continue to enforce immigration law. That's what the American people voted for. But it has to be a priority of criminals. And look, I hear all the hate about, you should arrest everybody. Oh, we are. But we're prioritizing those who are the biggest threat to our community. The rapists, the murderers, the child molesters. That's the right thing to do. But I'll say it again. President Trump made a promise of mass deportation, and that's what this country's going to get. But it's smart law enforcement to do target enforcement operations. Now, I've heard people attacking me using the word targeted. I sat for the last 2 months when I watched this operation, daily press briefs, and talking about targeted Title VIII operations. Nothing's changed, other than we're going to make sure they're targeted and make sure we know who we're going for, what their immigration record, what's their criminal history. That comes first. But enforcement of Title VIII is not going to end. If you're in this country legally, you're not off the table. And I think we're proving that if you look at the data.
Yeah. Mr. Homan, just had a question about the final number of arrests you had and how many of those people arrested were those targeted security threats you were after?
I don't have that exact breakdown. I know we made over 4,000 arrests here. That is something local field officers can supply. I don't have the exact breakdown. But I can tell you, since I've been on the ground, they've been target enforcement arrests. I believe there were target enforcement arrests before I got here. What I did is create one chain of commands where everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and integrate operation command centers. There were some issues here, and we addressed those issues. But I'm not going to sit here and say anybody did anything wrong, and that they were unprofessional. I'm going to say there were some issues here. We fixed those issues. We've had great success with this operation, and we're leaving Minnesota safer. The surge is leaving Minnesota safer, Minneapolis safer, because of the cooperation we got with the counties and the state and local law enforcement responding to our needs. I'll say it again. It's less of a sanctuary state for criminals.
Yeah, sorry to go a little off topic here, but can you confirm that CPD actually hit a party balloon instead of a drone with a laser during the incident in El Paso? And why wasn't that action coordinated with the FAA?
I have no information on that. It's out of my league.
So we're going to keep the questions to Minnesota topic. Go ahead.
Mr. Homan, can you specify how many county sheriffs, local jails have agreed to work with you and honor ICE detainers?
I have not met one county jail that says no to us. They want to work with us.
Okay, we have time for one more. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, Mr. Homan. You talked about this unprecedented level of cooperation between local officials and yourself. Can you explain more what is changed now in terms of that cooperation from before?
Several things have changed. First of all, when the agents were out doing operations and the agitators got a hand and posed a public safety threat, not just to the officers but the communities, law enforcement response has been sporadic at best. I think at what you've seen now, what you saw this past weekend, is law enforcement is responding to public safety needs quickly. And people were arrested for violating city ordinances as far as unlawful assembly and so forth. They've come to assist us to make sure our officers, the person we have in custody, leave that scene safely. You've seen it this weekend, and I'm happy that the local and state was there also, that responded, and we haven't seen any incidents of them not responding since we have these agreements in place now. As far as the jails, we got more cooperation, more jails than they had before we got here. And that's a good thing. We're having conversation with the state. And, state already accepted our detainees, but we're moving further on our agreements for the state. So the cooperation we have here is going to keep this city safer. It's going to keep our agents safer. Arresting public safety threats in a jail just makes sense. If we look at, I was talking to my chief of staff this morning on the way over here. I see that most people on the other side, when I say the other side, they say this argument with Democrats versus Republicans, whatever. But most of the people, even Democrats, are saying they want public safety threats to be the focus. They think public safety threats, illegal aliens, should be addressed. But to say that and not let us into jail, you can't square that. I just noticed the governor of New York, my home state. I've heard her say that she believes public safety threat, illegal aliens should be the focus of ICE. But to have a press conference last week to lock us out of the jails and end 287G agreements, how do you square that? You can't. So again, prioritization of public safety threats don't mean we forget about everybody else. We're going to enforce the immigration law, and we're going to have a mass deportation. President Trump promised that, and we're committed to that. However, it shouldn't be a partisan issue that you arrest public safety threats in the safety and security of a jail. Releasing public safety threats back in the public is just stupid. And I've been arguing this for years. And I hope Congress takes action on sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. It makes sense. If you think about it, even the argument I hear, well, victims and witnesses of crime that are in the country illegally want to feel safe to come to law enforcement and to report those crimes without fearing that this law enforcement agency is working with ICE. That's a bunch of crap. Because victims and witnesses of crime don't want the bad guy released to the neighborhood either. It's ridiculous. We want access to the person that you chose, the local jurisdiction chose, to lock in a jail cell. And we have that cooperation here now. It's the right thing to do, and it makes this community safer. This community is safer because we arrested 4,000 illegal aliens in this, over 4,000 illegal aliens here. Many of them public safety threat, not all of them. As I said, we're going to force immigration law, but this community is much safer because of President Trump's leadership and the men and women standing on this stage.
Thank you. That's all the questions we're going to take right now.
Our Tom Homan at the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis. And Homan says that mission accomplished in Minnesota. He says that the federal immigration surge has come to an end. It resulted in the success the feds came for. You heard the figure there, about 4,000 folks have been arrested, according to Tom Homan. And he, as he said, many quote, criminal aliens have been taken off the streets as a result of the surge operation. He says Minnesota is less of a sanctuary state for criminals now. Brian Bakst, our politics editor, has been sitting in studio with me listening to what Homan has been talking about.
And I guess we should point out the asterisks here.
Yes.
That this is not ending overnight, that some of these agents will continue to be here through the week and perhaps beyond, as he said, that as they see the conditions allowing for them to pull out some of the kind of this security types for the arresting type of agents, and they'll be repositioning other agents who would normally be here to other parts of the state to be more efficient at actually going to the jails to pick up people who they were saying they wanted to pick up all along.
Now, help me out here, Brian Bakst. He was talking about appreciating the support among various local officials, sheriffs specifically in county jails, to coordinate with ICE. I thought that they were already doing that they were notifying ICE if they had an individual in their jail.
Yeah, but there had been some gaps, and the gaps were they would notify ICE, and sometimes ICE wouldn't show up within the time before that person was due to be released. And a lot of the jailers around Minnesota said they were not going to take the liability risk of keeping somebody beyond their normal hold time. So they then allowed them back out into the community in some cases, or did something else, some other arrangements. But ICE, as Tom Homan just said, will be more in tune, I guess, with the release dates and be there when those folks are ready to be picked up. And there's also been some concern about if you're in a jail, a lot of times you haven't been convicted of anything yet. You've just been charged or accused of something. And so there has been some hesitation. Whereas with the state prison, those are folks who have been convicted and sent away for violent crimes. And so that's where the state has been more cooperative all along.
So Tom Homan, who's been here, a couple of weeks, taking over command of ICE and Border Patrol agents in Minnesota with this surge, said, alluding to some of what we've all seen over the past couple of months with agents dragging people out of cars and using battering rams to get into homes, and some pretty eye-opening violence between agents and, say, protesters. And he said, I'm not going to say that anyone has done anything wrong, but there have been some issues.
Yeah, and he also said, we do not want to see any more bloodshed. I don't want to see any more bloodshed. And he was talking about both officers and or people in the community. And so he was very much acknowledging that this operation has not been seamless. And that I think anybody who's witnessed it over the past couple of months would concur with that. And he talked about how you mentioned the number, he said more than 4,000 arrests of them, many of them public safety threats, not all of them. But just do the math here. There have been 3,000 agents on the ground and they made 4,000 arrests. So the efficiency thing is also, the administration is probably looking at this and going, how many more people are we even going to take off of Minnesota streets when there are other states and cities around the country that have far more people who don't have proper documentation or who have criminal records? They have to be thinking that at some point the returns are just not there for them.
So we should acknowledge, too, that federal agents killed 2 civilian observers during this operation. Yes. And we've not mentioned them. Renee Good, Alex Preddy, both U.S. citizens. They were not mentioned at all. None of that was mentioned during this news conference with Tom Homan, but it happened. And of course, this operation the past couple of months has really disrupted the economy. Schools were transitioning to remote learning because a lot of students were afraid to go to school. Immigration agents were seen around schools, that kind of thing. It's been very difficult.
And I would imagine that our reporters today, one of the things they're going to be asking of school officials or businesses is how long do they expect things to get back to normal? Because I'm sure nobody's going to take this necessarily at face value and say, okay, tomorrow everything's different. I'm going to go back to what I was doing. I think there's going to be a lot of hesitation that the public is going to want to see that the conditions on the ground have changed before they change their behavior back to something of a normal state.
Say, were you surprised? I was a little bit surprised to hear, we alluded to this before the news conference began, that Tom Homan, since arriving here a couple of weeks ago, has had back-channel conversations with a lot of different individuals here in Minnesota, including the business and faith communities.
Yeah, he's made that point in a prior news conference. He said he wants to really get the temperature of the community writ large. I mean, not most of his conversations have not been publicized. Of course, we've heard when he's met with the mayors or the governor because the governor or the mayors have said something about it. A lot of these meetings have happened pretty much below the radar, and he has not been the front and center figure that the prior leaders of the operation were.
Exactly. Say, we, of course, have calls out to all manner of different individuals because we want to hear what some people like Jacob Fry are thinking about right now. And some individuals will say the coordinated efforts that have been out there with constitutional observers. So we've got all kinds of calls out to all manner of different individuals. Perhaps if Estelle Timar Wilcox, she's actually was at the news conference at Whipple, and we are hoping to hear from her as well. With any luck, we'll get her on the line. Dana Ferguson, by the way, is with us. She's been listening in. I think we're going to send Dana to Governor Walz's news conference here a bit later this morning?
Yeah, the governor was due to have a news conference at 9:45 to talk about some sort of recovery package for businesses and others affected by this. I think, purely coincidence or not, it was timed to follow the Tom Homan news conference because the governor has been having these conversations, as we noted, and he foreshadowed this week. So I think that there has been some at least better open channels of communication since Tom Homan arrived than prior to that.
Dana, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Cathy.
Good morning. Appreciate you joining us here. What did you hear in that news conference that you think state lawmakers will definitely be reacting to, especially ahead of session next week?
Yeah, I mean, I anticipate that folks will be mixed reaction, I guess, but excited for some of them about many of these officers leaving. I anticipate that they will respond to Homan saying that Minnesota is much safer than when thousands of these agents got here. We've obviously seen and been reporting on a number of incidents, too fatal, but others where folks have been seriously injured, folks have been frightened. And so I just anticipate that that's something we'll hear more about. There'll be a lot of efforts to do some sort of cleanup after a lot of this. The governor is set to talk about sort of funding that might go out to small businesses that have been impacted. Lawmakers are talking about wanting support funding for people who've not been able to go to work because they're afraid of ICE agents picking them up. We also know that lawmakers are talking about other steps they might take too, including allowing a pathway for Minnesotans to sue the federal government over some of these unlawful detentions that we've seen.
You know, I think also, have you heard there was an effort in Duluth before the city council earlier this week, an ordinance that they were asking for a statewide renters moratorium to help folks who have been kind of locked up in their homes and have not been able to get out and work. Of course, They might be behind on rent. And the ordinance, of course, was tabled, which was upsetting to those at the meeting earlier in Duluth. But there were calls for the governor to call for a statewide, shall I say, rent moratorium. And I don't know if that would even come up in session.
It might. I anticipate it'll be discussed. I think there's some concern from the governor's office about declaring a state of emergency like we saw during the COVID pandemic to do that. There was just a worry that if that happened while the surge was on the ground, that the federal government might decide to deploy National Guard agents to Minnesota. So potentially if there's a little bit of de-escalation, that could be more of a possibility here, but we'll have to wait and see. And it's possible the governor gets asked about that today.
Dana, you've been talking to legislative leaders ahead of this upcoming session. Have they said whether there's an appetite for a relief package given the state's other financial concerns?
Yeah, certainly among Democratic leaders, it's something that is a high priority. And of course, we have to think about the fact that going into this legislative session, there is going to be a small surplus, but in the years ahead of us, it's looking a little bit cloudier for the state budget. So folks are really trying to prioritize what the state needs versus potentially wants. But there are some Republicans who acknowledge that small businesses have been really hurt by this. And so they are open to at least a discussion about it. But talking to House Speaker Lisa Dameth, who's a Republican yesterday, she said it should be more of, communities supporting these businesses, going out and shopping local or going to restaurants. And so she thinks that might be a better option. So we'll see what might be able to get through the very narrowly divided Capitol.
And it was interesting to hear Tom Homan say that among the agents who will be staying back are those who will be continuing fraud investigations, which has been all kinds of tied into this and at points the Trump administration.
It was the original reason they said they were coming here, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, interesting that that'll continue to be a focus, and there'll still be agents on the ground potentially in these more geographically spread out locations to pick up folks from jails. We'll see. And it's hard to know just how much has been accomplished on the ground in terms of fraud. We know that prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office have left, many of them who are really focused on these fraud cases. So there's concern that these cases might not yield the convictions that folks were looking for, and that a lot of that institutional knowledge is lost.
Dana Ferguson, appreciate your thoughts here, and I know you're going to be busy with the governor a bit later on this morning. We'll have that coverage as well with you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too. We should say, as Brian and I are talking here in studio, I have one eye on what's happening in the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate Homeland Security Committee is meeting right now, talking about local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement And before that committee is U.S. Representative Tom Emmer, of course, the House Republican leader from central Minnesota, St. Cloud area. Attorney General Keith Ellison is in Washington. He's also at this committee hearing. State Representative Harry Niska, House leader of the GOP caucus, and Corrections Commissioner Paul Schnell's there too.
Yeah, and we have Ellison's prepared remarks. I don't know if he's already given them because we were listening to Tom Homan, but one of the things he said is before the surge end was announced by Tom Homan, the one question any rational person might ask is why, because it really makes no sense. Every rationale the administration has offered for this surge is a pretext. He goes on to talk about how Minnesota ranks 28th among all the states in percentage of undocumented immigrants, but yet Minnesota had a greater concentration of agents at one time than any state has ever seen.
And of course, the governor called it retribution and also, called it an occupation. And that kind of got a war of words started between the governor and the president.
And there is still quite a bit of litigation between the state of Minnesota and the federal government because along with the immigration action, the fraud investigations, there's also been a lot of federal money tied up by the Trump administration. They've frozen it to say that Minnesota needs to show various things before they'll unlock the money. And Attorney General Ellison and the governor have been pursuing legal action to unlock that. And some courts have given Minnesota at least a temporary wins as the cases move ahead. So that's still to be decided too, is Minnesota going to be out additional federal money because of all of this?
Right. Now, if you're just tuning in, Border Czar Tom Homan has announced an end to the immigration crackdown in the state of Minnesota. He says ICE and Border Patrol agents have arrested more than 4,000 allegedly illegal individuals in Minnesota since it started back in December. Joining us right now is Steve Thal. He is an attorney practicing immigration law in Minnetonka. He's been listening in. And obviously, I'm thinking, Steve, you've been incredibly busy here the past couple of months.
Right. Yes, it's been an unprecedented time, and I think what we heard this morning is going to breathe a collective sigh of relief, not only for the community, but also for many immigrants, businesses who have been affected, schools, and even immigration attorneys to be able to have things turn to a normal or more normal state of affairs.
Can you paint a picture for us just exactly what you and your clients have been going through for a couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, certainly across the board, I would characterize it as a state of fear that just permeated many immigrants and their families and even citizens and permanent residents who have faced unlawful arrest or even in some cases detention. And it's just been a constant concern that has left a very reeling state of affairs that you never escape from. But I think as things now will wind down, hopefully we'll be able to restore some sense of safety and have things turn to a more normal state of affairs.
Steve, this is Brian Bakst. I know that nothing about this situation has been normal, but for the folks who have been arrested and brought into the federal system because of this, how long might it take for them to have their cases sorted out?
I really think it depends on the type of case. Certain cases are being given priority. Just this past weekend, we suddenly saw a surge of Somali asylum and removal cases get scheduled for rapid, what are called master calendar hearings or initial hearings. And I'm sure following those schedulings that there will be final hearings that will be accelerated. So, again, it probably depends on the case. Some cases, of course, can take years to get through the system, but we certainly are seeing a surge of Somali cases being scheduled more rapidly.
I'm wondering, as an immigration attorney, what do you want to see moving forward? Some folks want to require ICE to provide a full, transparent accounting of everyone stopped, detained, arrested, and deported from Minnesota. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think what we would want to see is a respect for the rule of law, and that people are given due process and allowed to have a fair and just hearing. One thing that we didn't hear in the recent news conference by Tom Homan is addressing the concerns of detainees in the Whipple building where he spoke from. It was in the news this morning that immigration attorneys from Minnesota Advocates for Human Rights had an opportunity to tour that facility, and the conditions were deplorable. So I hope that something like that gets addressed. I would hope also that going forward that ICE will honor and use judicial warrants when they're trying to seek someone from their home and not just use administrative warrants. And so those are some of the changes that we would hope would come about, and that we would see a more just and fair treatment of those who are here facing a removal system.
You know, because you deal with folks who are new to this country, I'm wondering, given everything that's happened in the past couple of months, I wonder what the level of trauma is and will continue to be moving forward for these folks.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a long time to heal from this. I mean, we've seen the effects for schools where kids are afraid to go to bus stops or even attend school. We've seen it in businesses. I've heard from many businesses who have already a shortage of workers, but then even those who have legal status are concerned about racial profiling and afraid to go to work or to go out into the community. So it's going to take a long time for the businesses to recover. I mean, we've seen effects at hospitals and other previously secure facilities that have had to deal with this ICE surge. And so it is going to take a long time to heal from this. And I hope that the community remains resilient. I can speak for other immigration attorneys. We certainly appreciate the support that came from the public. But again, it's going to take a while for all of this to heal.
I'm wondering here, because you know the system so well, what needs to be done moving forward now about the system? The current immigration process needs fixing. I think most people would say that would be true. And I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome, right? So we can't keep doing the same thing. What, from your perspective, needs to happen moving forward with fixing the system?
Well, certainly Congress needs to take action. I've been advocating for that for a number of years. There's many things that can be done. We need to make the system more efficient in terms of those who are able to come here legally through those processes. We've had a shortage of visas for various kinds of work categories. We've seen long backlogs in family-based immigration cases. So those are some of the things that need to be addressed. And I would say another major fix would be to have a completely independent immigration court that's not housed under the jurisdiction of the Attorney General. And so we've seen immigration politicized from both parties, but we truly could use reforms in the immigration court system to make it truly independent so that judges aren't having to act at the whims of whichever administration implements its policies.
And a final question, because I know you're very busy here, Steve. So I'm sure you're going to be hearing from clients here this morning. What are you going to tell them?
Well, I'm still going to tell them to be vigilant and that you need to take precautions, make sure that you carry whatever proof of legal status you have with you. And that if there are any concerns, obviously, to reach out to either our office or whoever is representing them of other immigration offices. But we'll wait and see if the surge has actually ended. But then hopefully we'll be able to continue to go forward to provide advice for ways that people can seek legal status or bring their asylum claims to fruition before either the U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services or, again, before judges in the immigration court.
Steve Thal, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Great. Thank you. And hopefully we'll see some better days ahead.
Thank you. Steve is an attorney practicing immigration law. He's based out in Minnetonka. So I think we might want to go to, is Estelle available, by the way? She has been at she was at the news conference here, and we would love to talk with her if she's available. Estelle Timar Wilcox was at the news conference, and we will hear from her a bit later on. It's 8:51, and of course, if you're tuning in, you're thinking, what has happened? We were just in the midst of a live news conference with Tom Homan. He, of course, is the border czar. He was brought into Minnesota. Greg Bovino, a Border Patrol commander, was ousted. Homan brought in a couple weeks ago to oversee the immigration crackdown in the state of Minnesota. He just announced this morning an end to Operation Metro Surge, declaring mission accomplished. And the feds have done what they set out to do. And so they will start to draw down their agents. At one time, Brian Bakst, there were, some 3,000 agents in the state of Minnesota? That's right,
3,000, which was the peak, and that was the number that they attested to in court, so that's the best number we've had to go with.
Okay. This is a little bit of audio, by the way, from that news conference with border czar Tom Homan.
I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue through the next week. We have a lot of work to do across this country to remove public safety risk who shouldn't even be in this country, and to deliver on President Trump's promise for strong border security and mass deportation. Law enforcement officers drawn down from this surge operation will either return to their duty stations or be assigned elsewhere to achieve just that. We will continue to enforce Title VIII immigration law throughout this nation. Prioritizing national security threats and public safety risks makes sense. But I'll continue to say over and over again, if you are here in the country legally, you're not exempt from our immigration laws. If we encounter you, we'll take appropriate enforcement action. For those that say we are backing down from immigration enforcement or the promise of mass deportations, you are simply wrong. Look at the data. Record number of arrests and deportations under President Trump's first year, and we'll continue that effort. Prioritizing public safety threats and national security threats doesn't mean we'll forget about everybody else. We will take action on everybody else. That's just a stone cold fact. A small footprint of personnel will remain for a period of time to close out and transition full command and control back to the field office, as well as to ensure agitator activity continues to decline, and that state and local law enforcement continue to respond to ensure officer and community safety. Additionally, federal government personnel assigned to conduct criminal investigation into the agitators, as well as the personnel assigned here for the fraud investigations, will remain in place until the work is done.
And that, of course, is border czar Tom Homan earlier this morning at a news conference at the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis. And at the same time he was talking, we should tell you that in Washington, a number of Minnesotans are testifying before the U.S. Senate Homeland Security Committee about immigration, the surge.
There's actually a pair of hearings going on. This one is in the House, so we've got a lot of Minnesota tension on Capitol Hill.
Exactly. So that Senate committee hearing, by the way, has Tom Emmer and Keith Ellison and Corrections Commissioner Paul Schnell. And then the House committee hearing that we're seeing right now on C-SPAN,
Kelly McCarthy of the Mendota Heights Police Department, chief and past post board chair.
Right. So there's a lot happening in Washington around this issue as well. We want to, of course, get reaction from folks who have been really at the front lines of all of this over the past couple of months. We've been talking on and off to Erica Zerwowski. Erica is the co-founder of Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, or MIRAC, and she's on the line right now. Erica, are you with me?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Cathy.
Hi, Erica. Well, it's been, as I say, I've talked to you now several times over the past couple of months. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the whole news conference that Tom Homan had at Whipple, but what are your initial thoughts?
I did have a chance to listen to the conference, and I am sick to my stomach. No one that understands what ICE really is and what the agents are doing is going to be happy about this press conference or this announcement. And I'm actually like trying to calm myself down, right? I'm almost at like the brink of tears, but out of rage. And speaking on behalf of MIRAC, like we have specifically demanded that our state leaders do not sell out immigrants for ICE. And I wake up this morning to news hearing that is exactly what they did. And it is disgusting, and I am enraged.
Erica, what do you mean by selling out?
So, as you know, like in the press conference, Tom Homan announced unprecedented, I'm so sorry, again, enraged, unprecedented cooperation between the state and ICE officials. And he announced that was the reason, like he specifically said in those words, like Minnesota is less of a sanctuary state. And that is the reason that we are agreeing to end Operation Metro Surge. What that means is that Governor Walz caved and cowered to Trump's racist agenda. And he did it against the wishes of the community that put him in power.
But would you agree, though, Erica, something needed to be done in order to pare back what we've been seeing? You know, the violence, the arrests in terms of protesters and observers. Of course, we had the 2 deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and something needed to be done to dial back this situation. You'd agree with that?
Absolutely, something needed to be done. But what needed to be done was not our leaders caving to racist immigration policies. That's not what needed to be done. What needed to be done was our leaders standing up on behalf of our community members that have been under attack by vicious and brutal ICE agents, to be standing up for our immigrant community members who have been kidnapped off the streets and out of their cars for looking brown. Like, the reaction to what we have faced on the ground here in Minnesota should have been Governor Walz and our state leaders stepping up and doubling down and saying we will never cooperate with ICE because they are a criminal institution to its core, and the way that they operate and the way they carry out this racist agenda is criminal. We wanted them to stand up and say, no, we are going to make Minnesota an actual sanctuary state. We will ban 287 jails or 287 agreements in our jails and in all of our counties and make it illegal to enter into those kind of agreements. That is the action that needed to happen, Cathy, not bowing down and selling out, in Governor Walz's words, so that Trump could win. Erica, those were his words that he used, and it is disgusting because we have been fighting on the front lines of this battle, not for Governor Walz to allow Trump to win. Erica, we have literally been fighting for our lives and for our communities.
Erica, Brian Bakst here. You heard Tom Homan say that there will be a residual presence here for some period of time. He didn't really define it. At what point do you feel like folks will feel comfortable letting down their guard at all?
Actually, I would really like people to put their guard on higher alert. I don't think there should be any letdown of a guard right now. So I want to talk about this in a way that really helps us understand how these immigration agents operate and work and how the immigration system works, right? I actually disagree with the last caller. I can't remember the name of the lawyer that was on about our immigration system, needing fixing. We'll get to that in a minute.
Right.
Okay?
But I'm going to have to go to news at 9:01 here, Erica. So real quick.
Okay. So, real quick, states that have these strong cooperation agreements and 287G agreements, and states that have strong cooperation with ICE have far higher rates of detention and deportation. Far, far higher rates. So what the governor signed on to is quiet violence. The governor literally said, okay, Trump, we're not going to let you sensationalize immigration enforcement because it's bad for optics. What we want to do is we want to quell public protest, and we want to have agents kidnap people more quietly. We want to forget due process. We want to ignore the Constitution. In our Constitution, we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But what 287G agreements really are is basically they are agreements that all immigrants are assumed guilty and never get and then get deported, right? Like immigrants are assumed guilty and then never get due process. So that's what he agreed to. And what they're trying to do is to quell protests, right? Because as we know, public protests are literally the only thing that has ever changed history. So they are trying to hide their violence. They are trying to stay quiet so that we get off the streets. And what we need from our community is to not cower and back down to Trump and to not let our neighbors be taken quietly.
Erica, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
That sounds great, Cathy. I would love to have a longer conversation about all this for you and for all the listeners out there. There's a lot to be said about what has to be done with ICE and getting it out of our state and out of everywhere. And I really hope that one day we can talk a little bit more about that. But for now, the main message I really need everyone listening today to hear is you need to stay in the streets because ICE isn't done. Again, quiet violence is still violence, and we have to put it to a stop. And we are solely responsible for making that happen because we saw our state leaders will not do it for us.
Erica Zarowski, co-founder of Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, or MIRAC. 9:02 here on Morning Edition. Well, Brian Bakst, what's next here in terms of what reactions we'll be hearing, do you think, this morning?
We'll be hearing from the governor at 9:45. I imagine that he'll have some of the same questions that posed to him as Erica just brought up about what the state agreed to or didn't agree to. Of course, we're watching these hearings on Capitol Hill. I'm wondering if there will be some instant reaction to there as well.
All right. Brian Bakst, our politics editor, thank you. Our live coverage will continue, of course. Emily Bright. We're actually going to get Emily Bright here with a look at the news. Thanks, Emily.
Hi, Cathy. Well, here's our news roundup. The immigration enforcement surge in Minnesota is ending. That's according to White House border czar Tom Homan. Speaking to reporters in the past hour, Homan said President Trump agreed that the surge of agents should end. Homan said, quote, a significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue through the next week. Homan declared Operation Metro Surge a success, saying about 4,000 people had been arrested since the surge began in December. He said there had been, quote, unprecedented levels of coordination, end quote, between federal and local officials. Homan also made clear that today's announcement does not mean an end to immigration enforcement in Minnesota. Homan denied that federal agents had arrested people inside hospitals, but as Erica Zurich reports, hospital workers are saying they're feeling unnerved at work due to the presence of ICE agents.
Healthcare workers have voiced their concerns about patient safety during the ongoing federal immigration enforcement surge in Minnesota, but they're also worried about the well-being of staff. They say that the stress and trauma they are experiencing stems from being targeted based on their immigration status or skin color. Several Twin Cities hospital employees spoke with NPR News about what they're observing inside of healthcare facilities. Employees report that federal agents scope out staff and have asked about their backgrounds in places of origin. Federal agents have also asked staff for their immigration documents. The Department of Homeland Security told NPR News that their fears are unfounded because ICE officers do not carry out operations in hospitals. I'm Erica Zurich.
U.S. cross-country skiing star Jessie Diggins battled through injury today to claim bronze in the women's 10-kilometer freestyle race at the Winter Olympics in Italy. The Minnesotan suffered bruised ribs in a race earlier in the Winter Games, which has made it difficult for her to breathe deeply. But she persevered today, collapsing to the ground when she crossed the finish line. Swedish skiers claimed the gold and silver medals. Diggins' bronze today is her fourth career Olympic medal. She previously won a gold, silver, and bronze. She is said this year will be her last time competing at the Winter Games. This is NPR News.
It's 9:05. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cathy Wurzer, Minnesota Public Radio News. Usually I'm not in studio at this hour of the morning. Angela Davis usually is here, but we are in special live coverage of yet another turn. We thought today would be a pivotal day with the ICE surge in the state of Minnesota. And we were right. Brian Bakst is with us, our politics editor. In case you did not hear or were not near an audio source, Tom Homan, border czar, says that Operation Metro Surge is ending. Mission accomplished. They did what they set out to do. Says in the next week, they're going to deploy officers here on detail back to their home stations or other areas of the country where they are needed. There will still be, though, Brian, as you pointed out, there'll still be ICE agents in Minnesota. Usually there are about like 100 and some odd.
150 or so, yeah.
So they'll go back to that, but there'll still be security details.
And there will also be some Homeland Security investigations, people continuing to look into some of the allegations of fraud. So yes, it's not a total drawdown. We don't have a number of what will be left, and Tom Homan said that the extra folks will be here for a, quote, period of time.
So, by the way, of course, we're having a reaction. There's no shortage of reaction to what Tom Homan said here this morning at Whipple. Mayor Fry, we reached out to him. He's declined an interview, but he says they thought they could break us, but a love for our neighbors and a resolve to endure can outlast an occupation. These patriots of Minneapolis are showing that it's not just about resistance. Standing with our neighbors is deeply American. He goes on to say, Brian Bakst, that this operation has been catastrophic for our neighbors and businesses, and now it's time for a great comeback, he says. We will show the same commitment to our immigrant residents and endurance in this reopening, and I'm hopeful the whole country will stand with us as we move forward together.
Yeah, and I want to point out to our audience that we don't know if there is any sort of hard and fast agreement, or, there was talk by Tom Homan of additional coordination, unprecedented coordination, but we don't know if that means that there will be things happening that weren't happening before, or if that was part of the messaging. Of course, this Trump administration does not like to concede defeat on anything. So he wanted to come out with a no surrender message. He said, quote, Minnesota is now less of a sanctuary state for criminals, and we're proud of the public safety threats and criminal aliens we removed from the state. We don't actually know what happened behind the scenes.
Right.
And we hope to find that out in talking to other officials, and perhaps if the federal government releases more information about what types of agreements will be amplified or just carried out as they may have been before.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we're already seeing some rumblings on social media about, what did you negotiate when it came to a drawdown of ICE and Border Patrol agents? Did you negotiate a restitution package or, something like that? So we have no idea. The governor, though, will be live here at about 9:45, right, with some of his comments. So, again, I just read that statement from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry. Hope to hear from him a bit later on, if that's possible. Let us go right now. Estelle Timar Wilcox has been at Whipple. She was there for the news conference. Estelle, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Cathy.
Good morning. Give us a sense of the tone in that room.
Yeah, well, handful of reporters. I will say it was a smaller crowd of national reporters. We're kind of more down to mostly local journalists at this point than we were 2 weeks ago. Homan came up to the stage in a suit, read some prepared statements, very similar to his past remarks. Really emphasizing, this idea of cooperating with local law enforcement and elected officials, and really sticking to his emphasis on focusing the operation on targeted arrests. He said with some other DHS officials, some officers in uniform were also in the room. Again, kind of his usual sort of quiet presence of sticking to his script, and he took just a couple questions at the end there.
In terms of some of the questions that you heard, did it shine any light on timelines and that kind of thing?
Yeah, he did not get super specific about the timeline of this drawdown. He said the drawdown is already underway, so we know some agents have been leaving. He said it'll continue into next week. And he also said that the agency plans to keep some security personnel around for those agents who are still out on the streets. He said that's out of concern for, in his words, agitators and, protesters, observers who we've seen out on the streets as well. And he said agents investigating fraud will also be sticking around here. Homan himself, is also staying in the state. He didn't give a timeline of exactly how long him or any of these other folks he mentioned will be here. But he said eventually the goal is to get back down to baseline of about the 150 agents who are typically stationed in Minnesota.
All right. Still, Timar Wilcox, I know you're busy on the team that's covering this story, and I know you got to get going. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cathy.
It's 9/11. We, of course, are in the midst of this live rolling coverage here on Minnesota Public Radio News. Joining us next is Jelani Hussein. He's the executive director of CARE Minnesota, and he is on the line with us. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So you obviously listened to the news conference. What are your initial reactions?
Well, I mean, this was kind of expected. I think last week we kind of heard what was coming, pretty much, that they have lost this point, and they were going to get to a point to end this surge. And I think the public and the community have been kind of waiting for this. I think relatively, as you just discussed, there are a couple of things that are unclear about what has been negotiated. I think the fact of the matter that both the murders of Alex Preddy and Renee Good and the prosecution of those have not been committed to. It's unclear where they're going beyond this. Obviously, ICE out of Minnesota does not mean go somewhere else. It's ICE out of everywhere. I think we set a playbook for every community across this country and how to continue to be constitutionally observer and to showcase how dangerous and how this force has been used unconstitutionally against U.S. citizens and communities and tore families apart. But I think the news this morning for many Minnesotans is good riddance, and thank God that this moment has come to this next junction. But I think there's still a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. There's a lot of pieces that we're going to pick up. I know we're going to be a resilient community. Today is a great day for all of us to kind of move forward in this moment right now as a community. And so, it's good news, but I know, the public needs to continue to demand justice for Renee and Alex. We need to uncover exactly what happened. There's still a lot of other abuses that have never surfaced. We're hearing about other things that have happened that we are still trying to verify. So there's still a lot of pieces to be picked up. And just because drawdown is being announced today, that doesn't mean it ended. As you also talked, or your other guests mentioned, that there's going to be still days and weeks where this is going to continue to happen until we fully see that all these ICE agents are out of Minnesota. And a tremendous day and a victory for all of us in this moment. And I'm just like many people, I'm extremely proud of our state. I'm proud of all of our Minnesotan community for standing up, for really doing what was necessary in this moment and showcasing the nation that how Minnesotans standing up was a symbol and a testament of our resiliency and who we are. And history books will remind the future generations that we stood up in moments where our country was teetering and our democracy was being tested. And it was a horrible day to deal with all of that, but it's a good day to move forward.
Jelani, Brian Bakst here. We heard from a immigration attorney last hour that many asylum actions are being sped up in regards to Somali people of Somali descent. And there's also this issue of whether temporary protected status for other communities could be in jeopardy. What's the level of anxiety in those corners?
Well, I think the Somali American community are dealing with it. Every single day that President Trump speaks somewhere, he is constantly attacking, demonizing this community. And that is not lost on any of us. There are significant consequences on his behavior, his signaling on this community, claiming that the entire community is responsible for fraud. This type of blatant racism is clearly the playbook of this president. We saw over the weekend the depictions of President Obama and Michelle Obama. That was not an accident. That's part of the pattern or practice. So, but as far as, we've heard a lot. We've heard a lot from our community as it relates to, the actions of the president, but also the continuous targeting of the community through our businesses, and now even calls for denaturalization. We've seen the speeding up of these court cases to be brought back up. And one of the reasons why is when they initially came to Minnesota and they were trying to capture all these Somalis, that was kind of their the early on indication, they couldn't because most Somalis are U.S. citizens. So they kept increasing the number of forces to see if they would capture more. And they couldn't, obviously. And so then now we're seeing them changing their strategy. They started to target lawful U.S. residents here. And many of the refugees who are here were vetted for years. They became part of the target. We had a judge order that stopped that. And then they now sped up the court dates for asylees and pulled them out of the line from everybody else. So literally moving them outside of the traditional line that they were in. So we are ways away from getting to a point where the Somali American community feels safe, feel validated and supported when you have the president every single day attacking this community, attacking Congresswoman Omar. It is an extremely difficult time for Somali Americans. And now these fraud investigations that seem to not be targeting credible information, but targeting a community is not over. So as we move on to the next chapter of this post-surge, I think people need to continue to wake up to this demonization and attacking of Black people, specifically the Somali American community, by this president.
I appreciate your time, Jelani Hussein. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again. Thanks for bringing me on today.
Jelani Hussein is the executive director of CARE Minnesota. We're going to go next, of course, if you're just tuning in. The big news is that the federal government says the 10-week campaign immigration crackdown in Minnesota that has roiled the state for the past 10 weeks or so, left 2 Minnesotans dead, is over, and that ICE agents and Border Patrol agents, the surge of those agents will be dialed back considerably. And joining us now with his reaction to this is Elliot Payne. He is the city council president in Minneapolis. Thanks, President Payne, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Cathy.
Minneapolis, of course, has been kind of ground zero for a lot of what's been happening with this immigration crackdown. It's been, I know, difficult for the past couple of months. What were your reactions when you heard Tom Homan say that it's over and mission accomplished?
My first reaction was, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll see you out on the streets. The last time they had a press conference announcing this, we would see agents out, targeting young children, driving drunk through the community, driving recklessly. So everything about this occupation of our city has been a lie. It's been built on a lie, and they've lied about Renee. They lied about Alex, and I don't know why I should believe them when they're telling us they're leaving. Just like Jelani said, they're still targeting our community. They're changing their tactics. They're focusing on asylum seekers and refugees and trying to disrupt their court proceedings. So them leaving Minnesota is not enough. We need to see accountability. We need to see justice for Alex and Renee. We need to see accountability up and down the chain for all of the laws that they violated in our state. And we need to see restitution. This has been a major impact on our city and on our economy.
You mentioned restitution. What does it look like for you? Are you looking at maybe the strain on schools, overtime pay for first responders, the negative impact on small businesses?
We need to take account for every one of the impacts of this violation of our rights, and we need to make sure that every one of those dollars that's accounted for is returned through federal stimulus. I mean, we had official briefings with our emergency operations manager having a conversation about what recovery looks like, and we compared it to the scale, the economic impact of COVID, and we saw $300 million come from the federal government in support of COVID stimulus. We're just right at the beginning of taking an account of all of the costs that we've had to bear.
There are so many listeners in greater Minnesota specifically who might hear you and say, look, this entire conflict could have been avoided if the governor and Mayor Fry had cooperated with federal officials. What do you say to that?
What their demands were status quo. People who commit crimes in the state of Minnesota get arrested and charged and convicted. They go to prison, and our state prison system works with ICE to hand over those convicted people for further processing of their immigration status. That is the law of the land. That's how we have operated long before Operation Metro Surge. And the talk of jails these are people who are pre-trial. They're not convicted of any crimes. And so I feel like people need to have a better understanding of our criminal justice system. And the reason that we don't have ICE detainers in the county jail, which, by the way, is not overseen by the city of Minneapolis, that is a county operation.
Yes.
Those detainers, denying those detainers was really core to public safety because, first of all, you are innocent until proven guilty. And if going to local police could lead to getting deported, it creates a big rift in the community between police and community, which actually goes against our goals of public safety.
By the way, I know I have to let you go here. The mayor has a statement, and he talks about it's time for a great comeback and how the operation has been catastrophic for neighbors and businesses. Have you had a chance to talk to the mayor this morning? Did you get early word of this coming down?
I didn't. I watched the press conference live at the same time as everyone else.
Okay. So what, in your estimation, would be a comeback for the city of Minneapolis?
Well, one of the beautiful aspects of this tragedy is the degree to which our community came together to look out for one another. And I have never seen a more connected and more bonded community in my entire life. And that is a powerful thing that we need to use going forward to demand the changes that are necessary to make sure this type of injustice never happens in Minnesota again, or anywhere else in the country.
All right. Elliot Payne, Minneapolis City Council President, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brian Bakst, I know you're going to go ahead and be pretty busy here later in the day. We're expecting a news conference with the governor.
Yes, I'm going to head across the hall to help talk that one up.
Okay. Brian Bakst, I appreciate it. By the way, the governor on X, the initial statement that he released here on X, I should probably tell you what that is this morning because, of course, we will cover the governor's news conference. Long road to recovery starts now, he says. The impact on our economy, our schools, and people's lives won't be reversed overnight. That work starts today. He'll have more at 9:45 this morning. Dana Ferguson, of course, one of our great politics reporters, will be there for that. It's 9:23. I'm going to send it over to Angela Davis right now to continue our rolling coverage. Angela?
I'm David Brancaccio, host of the Marketplace Morning Report. What's happening in Minnesota this winter has riveted the country. Like you and millions of others, I'm relying on the journalism coming out of NPR News. Help sustain independent public media. Donate now at nprnews.org.
Sorry about that. Live coverage, things happen. This is NPR News, 91.1 KNOW, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our coverage will continue, of course, throughout the morning into the afternoon. Live updates. We got the blog going at nprnews.org. All right, quick check of the forecast here. It's a sunny day. It's 30. Warm day today. 45 tomorrow. Pretty close to 50 degrees. Saturday and Sunday will be beyond 50 on Monday. Looks like lower 50s on Monday. And then we have a chance for some rain on Tuesday. Again, updates throughout the day. nprnews.org for all of that. Angela Davis.
I'm here, Cathy.
Yes, thank you. Why don't you take control right now?
I will. And thank you, Cathy and Brian Bakst, this morning for guiding us through our live coverage. Take a breath, as many of us are this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Davis. You are listening to live special coverage here on NPR News this morning. They are the words that many Minnesotans have been waiting to hear. Operation Metro Surge is concluding. It is coming to an end soon. Just after 8 o'clock this morning, Tom Homan, who is the White House border czar, held a news conference and announced a significant drawdown in the number of federal immigration enforcement officers who are here in Minnesota. He said that has already occurred and that more agents will be leaving in the days ahead, marking the conclusion of Operation Metro Surge. Now, Homan said that, quote, a small footprint of personnel will remain for a period of time to close out and transition full command and control back into the field office. But, for weeks on this program, we've been talking about what Minnesotans describe as the harm that's already been done, the distress and the trauma. Immigrants who are here legally have been afraid to go to work for fear of detainment or harassment. Families have been choosing not to send their kids to school because of ICE activity at bus stops and near school campuses. Businesses like restaurants have closed temporarily. Industries like construction have faced major setbacks as workers have stayed home. Events have been canceled. Protesters and constitutional observers have been arrested. 2 Minnesotans were shot and killed by federal agents. So right now, I want to hear from you about this news of what will soon be the end of Operation Metro Surge. In the 9 o'clock hour, we always take your phone calls. We listen to you. I want to hear from you. Pick up the phone and call in. What do you make of the announcement that this federal immigration enforcement activity is coming to an end soon? Were you watching or listening to that news conference this morning as Border Czar Tom Homan shared that news? What do you remember about that moment? Call us at these numbers, 651-227-6000. Again, you can call us at 651-227-6000 or 800-242-2828. Also need to let you know, a very busy morning in the news. We are standing by for a news conference that is
don't know if that means that the immigration agents who have been on the streets will not necessarily be on the streets in the same fashion. We don't know if they will only be concentrating on these lockups, the jails and the prisons. There's just so many things we don't know yet. We don't know what kind of coordination or agreement would have been struck. There's a lot of people guessing that there was something done, but we haven't seen anything to suggest that.
Because again, these are words. We've seen actions not match the words.
That's right. I mean, there's just still a lot of trust that has been broken over these past several months, and people just are having trouble getting their head around this idea that something concrete has changed.
Tell me again what is happening at 9:45 with this news conference with Governor Walz. Was this already scheduled before the news conference this morning with Tom Homan?
It was scheduled yesterday evening around the same time as the White House advised that Tom Homan would be talking. But this is, the governor had said earlier in the week that he was going to try to come up with some sort of financial hardship relief package to help either people who haven't been able to go to work, or businesses that have seen drop off in business, or schools that have had problems with attendance falling off and therefore seeing potential aid reductions. I think we're going to see a lot of those things in this package that the governor is going to lay out this morning. But of course, he'll be asked about the headline news today that ICE is starting to conclude this major operation, unlike any state or city around the country has seen. The sheer number of agents and the focus. One thing struck me in that Tom Homan news conference is he talked about there have been 4,000 arrests since December 1st, since this started. At one point, there were 3,000 agents. So if you look at it, just the efficiency of the operation wasn't gaining the numbers for deportation that the White House maybe thought it was going to.
And what was said in the news conference about where these federal agents, where are they going? Are they going to other states? Like, do we know?
Well, some of them will be sent back to their duty stations. A lot of these agents were based in other cities around the country, but were sent in. We don't know if this is part, we've seen this move from L.A. to Portland to Chicago. It's been this kind of where are they going to wind up next situation. We don't know if there's another city that the Trump administration or state that the Trump administration has its eyes on, but there are going to be still this at least 150 agents that would have been stationed in Minnesota full time. He said they'll be repositioned. And part of that is to make sure that when the jails give notification that somebody's time incarceration is going to be ending, they can get there to pick them up, because the jails have said, we don't feel like we have the authority to hold people one more minute, one more day after their release time.
Well, Brian, we asked, and now our listeners are calling in, already full phone lines from our listeners as we get reaction to the announcement this morning by border czar Tom Homan that Operation Metro Surge is coming to an end soon. He says a significant drawdown of federal agents has already occurred this week. More are leaving in the days ahead. So I want to know, were you watching or listening to that news conference this morning just after 8 o'clock? What do you remember about the moment? And what do you think is going to happen now? What are your thoughts about the harm that has already been done? 651-227-6000 or 800-242-2828. In Northfield, Mary is with us. Hi, Mary. Thank you for listening and call in. What do you want to tell everybody? Mary, go ahead. I can hear you. Okay, sounds like Mary's still driving around in her car. Let's go to another call. Jason joining us from a rural part of the state in rural Minnesota. Jason, what do you want to share with everybody as you react to this news?
I think it's wild how you guys have no opinions on, like, hey, maybe it's okay to deport these people that are here illegally. It's an echo chamber here. There's two people that got shot. It wasn't like this was going to happen. You sit there and blow horns at protests with these ICE people for days on end, weeks, months, it's going to end wrong. And you guys really don't even cover the fact that a lot of these protesters were organized. This wasn't an organic thing.
Well, Jason, first of all, it's not my job to have an opinion on what is happening. It's my job to share the voices of people who do have opinions. So I'm glad that you are sharing that. But my question is, what do you think about the news that it appears that this operation may be coming to a close?
Well, I think they still need to keep deporting them. I'm honest with you. I think it's okay to deport people that are here illegally. There's nothing wrong with that. And they did it under Obama, and Homan was under Obama, did the exact same thing, and it was okay then. But now that it's Trump, it's not okay. It's weird.
All right, that's Jason. Brian, yes?
Yeah, and I want to make the point, Jason talked about the protesters who have come in conflict with the federal agents. Tom Homan said that there are 200 arrests that have been made over various levels of assault allegation. Those are still working through the process. And he said that even after the big level of agents pull out, there will still be immigration agents here, and if they encounter somebody who is not in the country lawfully, they will be put into the system. There's still cases moving through the court system as well.
Right. So they were already here prior to this operation, but in much smaller numbers. So the
Correct.
work continues. Let's take another phone call in Minneapolis. This is Nancy.
Angela, and I just want to answer the previous caller. I am not an organized agitator. I am a community member in Minneapolis, and we have organically just rose to respond to what has been happening in our communities. And I'm not at all happy about this so-called drawdown by Tom Homan, and I'm really upset by Governor Walz capitulating and saying we will now have unprecedented cooperation, because all this means is that our community members are going to be more quietly abducted off of our streets, more quietly taken from jails before they have even had hearings about whether or not they have committed a crime. This needs to stop. ICE has done horrible things in our community, not just in the Twin Cities, but statewide. And what are we going to do? Send this to other states? The funding for ICE has got to be stopped, and things have to be reviewed. Not once did he admit to wrongdoing. They killed to people here in Minnesota. They have shot people in Minnesota. They have shot people in other states. They have killed other people in other states. We cannot let this happen. I don't care who is the head of the administration. This cannot be what is happening in our country. We need to be having our constitutional rights to free speech, to assembly, to be talking about what is wrong in our communities and not be prosecuted for it and arrested for it.
I hear you, Nancy. Thank you. At one point in the news conference early on, we did hear Tom Homan talk about his appreciation for conversations he's had with Governor Walz as well as Attorney General Ellison, leading to more cooperation. And also, expressing victory in a lot of the goals of the Trump administration. And Brian, what do you have to say to that and what Nancy is expressing?
Yeah, I'm certain when we hear from the governor in 10 minutes or so, he's going to be asked about what sort of agreement, if any, were made on this. And the other point about the funding of ICE, there was some funding for ICE in a bill passed last summer, but the Department of Homeland Security, which is the big umbrella agency, they run out of money come Friday unless Congress approves some sort of stopgap or a deal. I am not at all surprised that this announcement was made today, perhaps seeking to head that off.
I thought about that too. Is there a connection in this timeline because we're looking at DHS possibly losing its funding?
Right.
Another phone call from a listener, if you're just joining us, seeking your reaction to the news. This morning at a news conference from Border Czar Tom Homan that Operation Metro Surge is concluding. He says it is coming to an end soon. A significant drawdown in the number of federal agents here in Minnesota since they arrived in huge numbers in December, more agents leaving in the days ahead. What are your thoughts on this? 651-227-6000 or 800-242-2828. Again, we're standing by for a news conference from Governor Walz, expected to begin at 9:45 this morning, so in less than 10 minutes now. I do want to take a moment. We've got some folks calling in to share more of their perspectives. A guest we want to bring in, Michael Harris, is on the line with us. Michael is a professor of history at Augsburg University, and he has studied the history of policing in Minneapolis. Michael, were you listening to the news conference this morning, and what are your thoughts about these words?
Good morning. Yes, I was listening to the news conference this morning, and I guess what I was thinking about was the question of transparency and how many things that we don't yet know or understand about the potential drawdown, or let alone what happens in terms of immigration enforcement after Operation Metro Surge.
So tell me more about that, like what you're looking for more clarity on.
Well, I think it's there are so many things that we don't know. Mm-hmm. There's a question of how many agents are here, how many agents have been drawn down this week, as the Border Czar suggested. There's a broader question also of is there going to be a return to that previous level of agents and activity that we saw before Operation Metro Surge? Will there be any investigations or even, joint work with the state around the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy? Mm-hmm. There are a host of questions that I think have yet to be answered. And frankly, in some ways, the news conference this morning raised as many questions as it answered.
Yeah, and then we were hearing, too, just the trust issues that people here in Minnesota have right now with regards to the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is obviously welcome news to many Minnesotans, but I think many Minnesotans are also right to be wary because we have yet to see changes on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I think that regardless of where a Minnesotan stands on the question of immigration enforcement, there are these broader constitutional questions that have emerged over the last 2 months. And those are, questions about the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights matters to every American citizen and every resident of the United States.
Absolutely. Michael Harris, there, professor of history at Augsburg University. Stay with us there, Michael. I want to get a comment here from political editor Brian Bakst.
Yeah, these are all great questions and questions we've had as well. This operation has been fairly opaque throughout. We've heard, what the numbers of agents have been at the peak, at various points that they've had to attest in court that they were 3,000. but people have been moving in and out and being repositioned around the metro area and the rest of the state. So these are questions we've also had about arrests. We still don't have all that much information about arrests. We have the arrests that the Department of Homeland Security wanted to point out because people with longer rap sheets, they wanted to put those out there. But we don't know a whole lot about the rest of the complexion of the arrest. Tom Homan conceded today that not all of the people detained during this had a criminal past, which was kind of one of the stated missions of the Trump administration.
Mission stated very loudly.
Yes.
Right. Let's bring in another guest who can share some insight. We've got Zachary Acker on the line. Zachary is an immigration attorney with Martin Law here in the Twin Cities. Good morning, Zachary. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Hi. I know you've been busy. You've been following these developments very closely, and I imagine working with a lot of people who are immigrants. Did you hear the announcement? What did you think about the words that came from Border Czar Tom Homan?
Yes, I did not hear the announcement directly. I only heard about that secondhand after I had arrived at work. I would say that we're cautiously optimistic here, but I'm complete agreement with the other two guests that we're going to have to see what this actually entails. We're going to have to see actual changes in the ground. We're going to have to see what actually ends up happening here.
And Zachary, can you speak to just the number of people who are here in Minnesota who have, legal status or in the process of getting legal status, who have work authorization, but still were harassed or detained?
Right, yes. I have had several clients who were detained. These were people who were going through the process. They were complying with all their check-ins, had no criminal history, but they were caught up, usually in broader sweeps. Usually we were able to get these people released on bond, but it was a difficult process. The administration has been throwing up a number of roadblocks to that, trying to move people out of state before we can get the bond hearings filed to states where they're taking the position that these people are just not even eligible for bond. We have been successful in most of those cases, but it's been difficult.
And beyond the legal aspect, just the disruption to families, Zachary, what can you share about what that has been like for many families when someone was suddenly taken?
Yes, these have been parents in some cases with young children at home. It's been very difficult. We've also had a number of people who are themselves full citizens, natural citizens for decades, who are afraid to leave their houses just because they're worried that they will be racially profiled and taken into detention, and they don't know how long it would take them to get released. Lots of people have been scared to go to work, scared to leave their houses. It's been very disruptive.
And what about, the days and weeks ahead for many of the clients that you are working with? What are they looking at now in terms of, is it getting people back to Minnesota or helping folks who had some disruption in their work? Did people lose jobs? Like what is the work of immigration attorneys right now, even if this all ends, in the next few days?
Even if it does end, it's going to take some time before people feel safe to returning to going back about their lives, going back to work as they had been before December. As part of all of this, we've had a lot of cases moved forward to having hearings in the coming weeks, the next month, that had previously been much further out. It's really difficult to say. We're going to have to see what changes actually happen.
Thank you. That is Zachary Acker, an immigration attorney with Martin Law. Again, if you're just joining us, we are in special live coverage, getting ready for another news conference about to begin. Just after 8 o'clock this morning, there was a news conference held by White House Border Czar at the Whipple Building in Minneapolis, announcing a significant drawdown in the number of federal immigration enforcement officers who are here in Minnesota, saying that has already occurred concurred, more agents leaving in the days ahead, marking the conclusion of Operation Metro Surge. He did say that a small footprint of personnel will remain for a period of time to close out and transition full command and control back into the field office. Here in the studio with me, I have Brian Bakst, who is our NPR News political editor. Brian, we are standing by, starting to see people stand behind the podium for a news conference that Governor Walz is going to be speaking at, scheduled to begin at 9:45 this morning. What is the governor expected to talk about?
He's expected to talk about a relief package that he hopes the legislature will take up in the session that begins next week. But we're also expecting reaction to what Tom Homan said. And keep in mind that Tom Homan, who came in about 2 weeks ago and says he'll remain for at least the short period of time to come, has been having a lot of these back-channel discussions with city leaders and sheriffs, law enforcement, business leaders, faith leaders. He hasn't been as front and center as Greg Bovino was during
right.
the really the heart of the clash, the public clashes we saw. Greg Bovino was out there on the streets lobbing irritants at people just to kind of disperse crowds. Tom Homan has taken a different approach here. He's really worked to kind of see if he can negotiate through this.
And we see right now there are about 4 people standing behind the podium as we wait for the governor to walk up. In my notes, I have that these are local business owners and employees. A leader from DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, also expected to speak. So with the legislature getting back into session soon, what's going to be the discussion there?
Well, we see the governor walking out, so I'm guessing he'll have something to tell us very, very shortly as soon as he begins his remarks. But the legislature is going to be dealing with all kinds of issues around immigration in general and the recovery that the governor says needs to happen now that ICE is pulling back.
Here's Governor Walz.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start today expressing a deep sense of gratitude and a deep sense of pride to my fellow Minnesotans. Over the past 6 weeks, the state of Minnesota and the people of this great state have endured an unprecedented federal invasion in all aspects of life. Our sense of normalcy was shook to the core. The trauma that's been inflicted, certainly across an immigrant community, but to every single Minnesotan, is unlike anything we've witnessed. We've been through challenges. We've been through natural disasters. We've been through COVID. But this is something that I don't think any state has ever experienced. And through that entire time, the dignity, the compassion, the love, the care, and the absolute determination to do what was right never wavered amongst Minnesotans. Whether it was standing in minus 40 degrees temperatures or it was delivering food to a family that simply wanted to feed their children. Minnesotans never wavered. And for that, I will be forever grateful. I think it's probably safe to say the rest of the country will be forever grateful because they showed what it means to stand up for what's right, to stand up for the true principles of this country, to stand with the Constitution, and to stand with human decency. And so I want to note that the announcement today by Mr. Homan, we are cautiously optimistic, as we've said, and that this surge of untrained, aggressive federal agents are going to leave Minnesota. And I guess they'll go wherever they're going to go. But the fact of the matter is, they left us with deep damage, generational trauma. They left us with economic ruin in some cases. They left us with many unanswered questions. Where are our children? Where and what is the process of the investigations into those that were responsible for the deaths of Renee and Alex? So while the federal government may move on to whatever next thing they want to do, the state of Minnesota and our administration is unwaveringly focused on the recovery of what they did. And there will be many steps in this process, many answers that we still need to get and will pursue. But as we started earlier this week, one of the first things we can do and what we're focusing on today is what can we start doing on the economic recovery, the damage that has been done to our economy, specifically to small business owners, and even more specifically to immigrant small business owners, which for every other administration and for most of our history is the epitome of the American dream. Come to this country with nothing and build something to be proud of, build something that creates jobs, build something that creates this incredible diversity and a food scene across this state that is second to none, to entrepreneurship, to the work that they've done. Meeting a few weeks ago down at the Hmong market, and a gentleman who came here and got a food stall, and 3 of his children are now medical doctors that went through American universities to become medical doctors to help make this state the best for health care. Those are stories we should be celebrating, not dangerous police chases through peaceful neighborhoods, not little boys in little backpacks being hauled away, and not mourning of parents and family for American and Minnesota citizens being killed on the streets. So, Minnesota, on behalf of not just this state but the country, thank you. That same energy now needs to be directed towards recovery, to finding ways that people have done during these challenging months to go forward. So I want to say this damage is still being assessed, but we do know, and you're going to hear from some folks, you're going to hear from Henry, you'll hear from Commissioner Verlick about where we're at on the front end of this, and we're going to be proposing a reinstitution of our Small Business Emergency Fund. It's what we used very successfully during COVID in the recovery and the economic recovery that we saw in Minnesota that outpaced most of the rest of the country. We're going to be proposing a first-time $10 million one-time targeted loans, forgivable loans that we know, and I want to be very clear, is a very small piece of this, but what I am going to challenge as we get ready to start here in a few days, the legislative session, this legislative session needs to be about recovery of the damage that's been done to us. I am also asking our team, and I'm going to make appeals to our federal delegation, the federal government needs to pay for what they broke here. There's going to be accountability on the things that happened, but one of the things is the incredible and immense costs that were borne by the people of this state. The federal government needs to be responsible. You don't get to break things and then just leave without doing something about it. So we're going to be asking the federal delegation to be investing and doing the things necessary. We have been in contact with federal leadership as a negotiation is happening right now on DHS funding and all of the things that we have an expectation, whether it be the investigations, whether it be going forward, no masks, because this, I got to tell you, one of the things, and I'm in contact with a lot of my colleagues, both at the federal level with the Senate and the House, but especially governors. I don't want these folks showing up somewhere else and doing this. So the changes that need to be made, the investments that need to come back, they need to show, they being the federal government and they being this administration, they need to do more. But I'm not going to hold my breath that the federal government's going to do the right thing. What I am going to do is I'm going to bet on the people of this state. And when we come into this legislative session, an expectation is this should be a bipartisan effort to protect these businesses, to protect what we have in Minnesota, to make changes here to improve this state. That should be very easy. And I think we've seen just some of the data surrounding this. There's very few things in this state that are more unpopular than what just happened to us, and there's few things that are more popular than recovery and supporting small businesses. So Minnesota, I know you've been through a lot. I know that we're still in the deep part of winter, but it's going to be 40 today here. The sun's going to be shining, probably a pretty good metaphor for spring is out there, summer over the horizon, but it's going to take a lot of work. So the expectation is of myself and our administration and the elected leaders, we get busy in this legislative session and start repairing the damage from this, start putting in safeguards that it doesn't happen again. And I think using the momentum that we have to celebrate, Minnesota's reputation has been pretty well solidified out there of caring, gritty people who back down to nothing and do the right thing for their neighbors. And I think now we continue that same attitude into this legislative session and into this recovery to help the folks standing behind me and thousands of others to get back what they do best, creating jobs, creating opportunities, creating a good life, being able to see their children go off to school and then celebrate by, watching a baseball game when things start up here this spring. We're not asking that much, but there's going to be work to do. You've got our pledge that we will do everything possible to make that happen, and today is a very small first step, but it is a concrete step that can make a difference. With that, I'm going to turn to Deed Commissioner Matt Barilek to talk a little bit about how we expect this program to work, and then we'll hear from Henry as a spokesperson for what the impact has been of a small business and what this can do to help. Commissioner Barilek.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Governor. And I would echo, first of all, the governor's sense of Minnesota pride right now for all that we've been through and the way we have stood up, and also the optimism about the fact that we now may be at a transition point in this process, if indeed the federal presence will be winding down. But I want to emphasize what he said, that the economic impacts will be very long-lasting. It was maybe a couple of weeks ago or so that we stood up with some of these very same small business owners and highlighted there the massive negative economic impact that is resulting from the fact that a lot of workers don't feel comfortable showing up, a lot of customers don't feel comfortable showing up, and so we're seeing massive reductions in that foot traffic, massive reductions in revenue, et cetera. And so that's why it is so important, first of all, that the governor launched the Shop Local campaign as part of our Shop Local Stand Together effort in this month of February, and now this additional measure of the $10 million in targeted small business partially forgivable loans we think is another important step. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, the notion is that the loans would be 0% over 3 years. After 1 year, there would be an opportunity to seek 50% forgiveness on the basis of proving that you have had substantial impacts from the presence of the federal agents. The eligibility would be businesses with annual revenues between $200,000 and $4 million, so it's targeting small businesses, and the value of the loans between $2,500 and $25,000. And so, again, to acknowledge the point that the governor made, we know that the economic harms are far in excess of that, but this helps, we believe, alongside the other things that we've been doing and that others have been doing. Also would note that we're working with some private sector partners to seek reduction or even elimination of some of the fees that private sector service providers provide to small businesses. Not sure, if they will take us up on that, but that's one other effort we're doing. And we again applaud folks like the Minneapolis Foundation, Latino Economic Development Center, and others who have stood up private sector funds for small business relief, and in many cases those have been funded by some of our larger businesses in Minnesota, so an example of mutual support. All of those things we hope at least mitigate some of the harm that's been done here. And to give you an example of that harm, I mean, number one, last night I was out at a great place, Sabores Fresh Market in St. Paul, a grocery store that has a restaurant in the back. I had some great pupusas, but heard heartbreaking stories once again of what massive impact there has been. And likewise, we are going to hear that story from Henry, who runs a supermercado in St. Paul as well. So Henry, if you would please join us and share your story. Thank you.
Okay. I want to say thank you for everyone here. Thank you for the Governor Walz and the Commissioner Berlink. I apologize for my accent. I want to speak in Spanish, but I have to speak English today. Spanish is my first language. I came from Colombia 23 years ago, looking for American dream. Many people, many immigrants from different countries came to America looking for the same thing, and we are working hard. And now it's difficult times for many families, for us, for many businesses, but we're still working hard every day, no matter what happens. We believe in our governor, we believe in the law, we believe in America. we working for the dream. I want to read something that I wrote last night. Okay, my name is Henry Garnica. I own a Centromex supermarket at the East St. Paul, along with the partnership distribution company that serve other small businesses in the Midwest. Centromex is a neighborhood corner store with open door to welcome all people. It is a space where everyone feels comfortable to be in. Since federal ICE activity increased late last year, everything has changed. On December 11, my store was targeted. We were lucky. Nobody was detained, but the impact caused for a lot of damage for small businesses, including my business. Sales down in many cases between 30 or 40%. It's a lot, and the recovery for that takes a long time and more energy. We had to do a big job together. My customers are afraid to go in shopping. You have to adjust the operation. We had to lock the door. It's not good because we are in America. We never expected that. We are worried about how the things are coming, but we hear from our governor that the things change soon. Will be a good environment for everybody, for the whole communities, not only for immigrants, not only for Latinos, not only for Afro-Americans, it's for the whole community, for the whole Minnesotans. Through my distribution company, I see the impact across the other small businesses too. The businesses are part of the fabric of our neighborhood and our vibrant economy in Minnesota. I attended a large Did Shop Small Stand Together campaign, and the support from the community since there has meant a lot. This is a new campaign that everybody knows. I can see every day in my business many new customers, Americans, 100%, and they are going to buy stuff in my store. I feel blessed. I think it was a good initiative from the governor, local governor. I have many friends in the other stores, and they see the same thing every day. It's a big help. I appreciate that. Thank you for the initiative. It's a good blessing. It's a good thing for all small businesses. But sales dropped like they have. Goodwill alone can cover rent or payroll. Small businesses don't have a safety net. The proposed 10 million forgiveness loan package could be give a business like breathing room to keep employees, to keep the staff, to keep paying the payroll, to keep restocking the shelf. But we need more. I think we're expecting at least 3 or 4 or maybe 6 months for recover the business again, because we are in a really tough situation. With the community support and smart economic relief, we can move forward. Finally, I want to say I am grateful for leaders who are standing with the small businesses during this difficult time. I am also incredibly thankful for the community members and volunteers who show up to help every day, no matter the weather. Our governor says people working below zero, 23 below zero, and many volunteers without anything, expecting to get any money. They support in the small business, they support in the communities, not only in the East St. Paul. I understand it's in the whole Minnesota state. It's why I feel really proud living in Minnesota. My respect for the all volunteers, my respect for the all Minnesotan people, for the governor, for the police department, for everybody. We feel safe, but we need to feel the freedom again. This is a thing that I had to keep it every day. Almost I put it on my pillow, make sure don't forget it for the next day. And the other thing I had to keep on my pocket is my ID. But hopefully we don't have to do this more. Finally, no matter, say again, no matter the weather, the volunteers working strong with the warmer hearts, and they are a good example, the peace, love, and big community in Minnesota with the entire community. Thank you, Governor Walz. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, and thank you for everybody, and God bless the all volunteers. God bless Minnesota. God bless all Minnesotans and all the small businesses, because we need to work hard and make the Minnesota hard, strong, and big state. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Henry, and to Henry, and I want to speak directly to Minnesota's immigrant community, by extension, America's immigrant community. We see you, we hear you, we value everything that you bring. We understand here in Minnesota that there is no Minnesota without our immigrant community, and it was the wave of Norwegian and German immigrants a century ago, Hmong immigrants half a century ago, Somali, East African, no matter where you come from. We believe in those words. Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be breathe free. This is a place you can breathe free. And my message to you is, the majority of Minnesotans and Americans stand on your side. They stand on the side that immigration is the core of who we are and that human decency. So as we go on this long road to recovery, it's going to be hard for many of you to get back the trust, to be able to go out again without fear you're going to be asked for your papers, or to be singled out because of how you look. We in here in Minnesota have always made that clear, and I will attest that's why we were the target of this, because we are a successful multiracial, multicultural state that has one of the highest standards of living, that values our people and understands the people standing behind us are making that happen. So it's going to be a long road, but I think you saw, and I'll say it again, Minnesotans are decent, caring, loving neighbors, and they're also some of the toughest damn people you'll ever find, and we're in this as long as it takes. With that, we'll take some questions.
Governor, how did this come together? You've been in talks quite a while with Wurzer, Homan. Can you walk us through that?
We have been communicating a lot, and I just want to note the way the state of Minnesota is addressing immigration is exactly the same today as it was 3 weeks ago, or 3 months ago, or 3 years ago. We've said that we are more than willing, and we understand it's our responsibility, and we support humane, rule of law immigration reform. It's why I've advocated as a member of Congress and as a governor that we need to have reforms that allow a path to citizenship for the folks we want here, and the ability to do targeted enforcement for those who shouldn't be here. So we continue to express that. We continue to work. I think probably what changed was when Tom Homan came here, I could get a conversation with someone. Not a single interaction, Kristi Noem, Bavino, or any of the rest of them, and an arrogance that it didn't matter. And I think, as I said again, it became very clear to the administration, especially after the murders of Renee and Alex, and the horrific actions of these agents on the ground, that an issue the president saw himself as being strong, certainly politically, has eroded into a albatross around their neck. And so I think, in my take was, they knew they needed to get out of here, but in very Trumpian fashion, they needed to save face. So we've been talking, and I will say this. Tom Homan said today that he and I disagree on a lot of things. That is probably an understatement. But as I said when he first came in, and first thing he did was call me when he landed and then meet the next morning, is that at least there was a consistency to what he said, and he followed through with it. So we got indications that this is where they were headed. And again, I think probably we would be back to that pre-surge number in the very near future. Yes, ma'am.
Does this announcement change the way you're thinking about DHS funding and whether they should receive funding going forward?
No, and I just want to be. This is a really kind of tricky thing with this administration because they change their mind, or if they think the president thinks he's not getting the upper hand. I'm certainly not going to spike the football, but you're not going to hear me express any gratitude for the people who caused this unnecessary, unwarranted, and in many cases unconstitutional assault on our state. And my expectation is we still need to have those investigations. And I'm telling you, in this economic crisis they created, all of these cabinet agents came in here to try and please the president by attacking Minnesota. So we have a $2 billion cut from Dr. Oz in our DHS programs that are rural hospitals and things. So it doesn't change it at all. And I think the lessons learned, I'm more than happy to help Congress say some things, is in America, you cannot expect that the people are going to be okay with masked, unidentified people running you off the road and coming to your vehicle at gunpoint like we saw in St. Peter, Minnesota. So if ICE, which Tom Homan's right about this, they have a mission. Now, I don't know if this iteration of ICE can last, but the idea of immigration reform and border control, we all agree with that. What we disagree with is that what happened in Minnesota had anything to do with that. It did not. So I hope, and I would encourage, and we have been contacting with Leader Jeffries and Senator Schumer to hold the line till you get the at least minimum reforms necessary in this rogue agency to get something done. So yes.
This still doesn't totally answer the question on everyone's mind, which is when are these ICE agents leaving? We obviously know that some of them will stay and sort of go back to business as usual, be pre-positioned around the state, but
Mr. Homan said this week and early next week. I talked to Mr. Homan after his press conference, and he assured me that they are going, all the surge is going, and they're going immediately. So as soon as they can pack their stuff, book a plane, move on. I would volunteer. We will help you get to the airport. We will clear the roads to get you to the airport. I will come over and pack your damn bags if that's what it takes. But I think it does answer the question. And again, this is a trust but verify. I am skeptically optimistic. I have no reason to not believe that when Tom Homan said they will be gone almost immediately. So it'd be my expectation, I think, certainly by the middle of next week, this is back to the 150. So yeah. Yeah. I think, and I'm trying to look, I don't know all the details because it's not what a executive branch should do to interfere with an independent judicial branch. And so as far as the BCA goes, they do what they need to do. And it was my understanding we were very close to a joint agreement. And then at least what we're hearing is that was pulled back. And this is somewhat a speculation, but it's how I'm viewing it, just to be candid with all of you, that the federal government pulled back because there was a leak before they could announce it. So I think we all have to be really careful. This is like a fourth grade game of who gets last hit type of thing. This administration always has to get the last word. This administration always has to be viewed that they won. And in this case, I think they understand they have got to do a joint investigation. So it is my expectations we will get a joint investigation. I would hope that this surge leaving and at least that piece being off, because that's one of the three demands that we will have to see here. This was getting rid of the surge, independent investigation, and then stop the attack on our state government agencies. So as I know right now is we were very close. I think obviously there's a contingent inside the FBI and the federal government that understands the only way you do these is through a joint investigation. And it's very clear, and again, if anybody in the administration or outside of Minnesota thinks because this surge that they're leaving, that somehow everything's okay and we've forgotten about this, the folks who are out there asking for this are going to turn their attention to these other things now. And so my hope is, and it could go a long ways, is we get an announcement in the the near term. Again, we're only asking for what's always been done. We're only asking for the right thing, and we're only asking for what is the core of who we are. Justice needs to be served, and I don't know. I do not know. We saw yesterday the federal government's putting a ton of effort into trying to indict 6 members of Congress, the House and Senate, and a grand jury said, are you out of your minds, and threw those out. So what we need is, we need what's left of a decimated U.S. Attorney's Office here to get back to the work of stopping drug trafficking, stopping crime that's there, helping us on fraud investigations, and then getting us this investigation. So nothing further yet, but I think the framework is in place, and it's just a matter of them feeling like they have an upper hand to announce it, and I hope that would happen soon. Yeah. Go ahead. Nothing has changed. The final agreement is that Minnesota would continue to do what we do, which is law enforcement, honor, those things, and that we would do what has always been expected and has done for decades here, is if there's someone who is in a Minnesota prison and there is an ICE asking us to hold them, once their sentence is served, we notify ICE and turn them over. And that has, in every single case, you've done the investigative work, that's what's happened. So nothing has been changed. They continued to ask me. One of their demands is that I ask people to be peaceful in their protesting. That's an easy thing for me to do because that's what I said. But I'm not going to ask them to not be on the streets. I'm not going to ask them to give up their constitutional, their First Amendment rights, their Second Amendment rights, their Fourth Amendment rights, and for the state, the 10th Amendment rights. So what I've been telling you is this is exactly what we've been doing. And when I went to Congress 2 months ago and testified for 8 hours, as they incorrectly said Minnesota is not adhering to this, I testified for 8 hours. Nothing came out of that, and yet they came here. So I think to tell people, we're just going to follow the law. And when it comes to this, no one's disagreeing that you shouldn't have immigration enforcement. But it should be with due process, and everybody gets that. And it certainly should be done humanely. And you certainly, if you're truly going to focus on the worst of the worst, why are you going after our neighbors who are in the system, following the law, trying to reach naturalization? That doesn't make any sense. So Minnesota's doing what we did, but I'll tell you what, it steeled our resolve of how much we're going to protect our immigrant community. It steeled our resolve that we will do what we should do, they should do their job, and it's become very apparent to the people of America that this is not the way to do it. This is not the way to go about it. This doesn't make us any safer. And so with that, yeah, go ahead.
Any updates, any progress on the flow of federal dollars to state agencies, state programs, that sort of thing?
No, not. Thank you for the question. And this question about the flow of federal dollars, and and you saw this. I think you saw it yesterday in the hearing on Capitol Hill on the Epstein files. Each of these agency heads, and I mean that is certainly troubling in that about the non-independence of the branch of the AG's office, law enforcement. But each of these cabinet secretaries wanted to please their boss so much, they just came to Minnesota and piled things onto us, piled in data requests, piled in letters, threatened to withhold money, threatened to do all of this. Those are the things that are doing immense damage at a time when we're going to need that, and I remind people of this. Minnesota contributes more than we get from the federal government. When it came time to look at things like a scale on how solid and lack of corruption in state government, Minnesota ranks in the top 5 best states. All of the things about running things and doing it right, We follow the law. We do it right. We provide more federal dollars. And in my opinion, this unallotment around what Congress has appropriated and what the law says Minnesota should get, the president is arbitrarily, and his cabinet secretaries are arbitrarily holding that money. So back to this first question to end on, this about what DHS reform should do. We are pushing our congressional allies, and I would think the Republicans in this, before any deal is made with DHS funding, all of them need to quit this assault of, and again, I will use the president's word, retribution against Minnesota. Not because we have more undocumented people, not because of any reason other than he decided that this is a state they would try and make an example of. And look, I'm treading a pretty fine line here. He picked the wrong state to make an example of. And that is where things set today. So we'll see over the next few days. We are in a trust but verify phase. My word to Minnesota is, again, we're certainly not going to celebrate something that should have never happened. But I will say this. Please keep, at this point in time, stay hyper vigilant. I'm afraid over these next few days with some of these folks leaving that the potential for an incident like we saw up here near the cathedral with this chase yesterday, what we don't need is some horrific thing happening on the way out. But I will say, as we started on this in the hours after the murder of Renee, is express your constitutional rights, stand up for your neighbors, speak out when you need to speak out, do so peacefully, because as I said then, and every one of you proved the fact is, at the end of the day, that will win out. That is the way a democracy should function, and it seemed like a long ways from that January day that we would get to a point where they would say, we're leaving. But today is about a lot of destruction over those weeks, a lot of damage, a lot of trust has been eroded. A lot, as I said, we've got children that a core memory for them will be their classmate being taken away. And that will stick with them the rest of their lives. And my hope is what sticks with them is human decency wins out, rule of law matters, that arc of the moral universe is bending towards justice, and we are under no illusions that it will magically happen itself. All of what we're talking about today was put onto Minnesota, and it was Minnesota citizens, I'll say it again, nameless, faceless folks who were endured whatever it took to make a difference. So our work is beginning here. We'll do the recovery, encouraging the legislative leaders to get ready for a recovery session. And my certainly on this is back these proposals and let's get this money to these businesses and get back to normal. Thanks, folks. Thank you all.
You are listening to live special coverage here on NPR News. I'm Angela Davis. You've been listening to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz respond to an announcement this morning, just after 8 o'clock this morning, a news conference held by Tom Homan, the White House border czar, announcing a significant drawdown in the number of federal immigration enforcement officers who are here in Minnesota, saying that has already occurred and more federal agents will be leaving the states in the days ahead, marking what appears to be the conclusion of Operation Metro Surge. It appears to be coming to an end soon. But you heard Governor Walz there say at the beginning of this news conference that started around 9:45 this morning that he is cautiously optimistic. And he described the ICE agents and Border Patrol agents we've seen here across the state as untrained and aggressive, saying that they left us with deep damage and economic ruin. Also here in the studio with me, I have political editor Brian Bass. And Brian, a lot to go over here. But what stands out to you in the governor's message? We saw him at the news conference standing in front of a group of business owners, the deed commissioner, again, talking about how the economic damage that was done.
He used the phrase long road to recovery several times, meaning that even after the agents pull out of here, what they left behind will still have to be dealt with from a financial, economic standpoint, from a rebuilding trust standpoint. And he talked about children having to kind of have different memories or the memories that they might have and how to help them through it. One thing did stand out to me, though. He said he talked to Tom Homan after Tom Homan spoke just to be extra sure that this pullout that Tom Homan talked about will happen. He said he got confidence that it would happen by the middle of next week. And he said if it takes him packing bags or clearing the roads to get people to the airport, he'll do that. But I mean, on a broader point, though, he did say that Minnesota's sense of normalcy sense of normalcy was shocked to the core, but it also steeled the resolve of a state. He talked a lot about Minnesotans rising up to push back.
And the money, the economic recovery part of this. I mean, the point of the news conference was to talk about what the state legislature and what he as the governor, what they can do now to support small business owners who, we saw so many businesses close temporarily and people lose their income.
Yeah, he said that they would be pursuing some no-interest loans for businesses, maybe waiving some fees or other charges that businesses face. He said that legislators should expect this to be a recovery session. But keep in mind, Angela, the legislature is as closely divided politically as ever, with a tied Minnesota House and a one-seat Democratic majority in the Senate. Nothing is a sure thing on this proposal list that the governor put out.
And the session starts on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
We just heard from our Democratic governor. What have we heard from Republicans, either in Congress or in the state legislature so far this morning, about an end? Hopefully an end soon to Operation Metro Surge.
Well, Angela, as everything these days, there are two different reads on the same pattern of news that we heard. We heard this morning from Tom Emmer saying, quote, "Job well done. Tom Homan, law enforcement is now cooperating with federal law enforcement in Tim Walz's Minnesota. Thanks to President Trump's leadership. We're hopeful that this partnership will continue with or without local or state interference to ensure the worst of the worst are being removed from our communities." Of course, Tom Emmer is the third-ranking member of Congress. He's from central Minnesota. But it was a different sense of what the governor said, because our Dana Ferguson asked the governor about whether there would be additional cooperation, coordination, and the governor basically said nothing has changed from our prior position. Again, we don't have anything in writing from what kind of might have been happening behind the scenes. The governor also, one other thing he brought up was the investigations into the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Macklin Good. Yes. He said the state still wants to be part of those investigations and so far hasn't been able to convince the federal government to let them in. He said they'll continue to press that. And he said some of the stuff might have to be negotiated as part of that Department of Homeland Security funding bill that's presently before Congress.
Yeah, because we don't want to lose sight that 2 Minnesotans were shot and killed.
Right.
And there's been this conflict between the FBI, DHS, the State Bureau of the BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, on how these investigations should be conducted. And so moving forward, so many questions, still so much that is unresolved.
Right.
And, one of the things, again, as we look at what the governor just now was really focusing on, the economic impact, he said the federal government needs to pay for what they did.
Yeah, he almost some sort of reparations he said the federal government has to pay for what they broke. And he said that Department of Homeland Security bill that's before Congress right now might be a vehicle for it. He's working with members of Minnesota's congressional delegation, presumably mostly with Democrats, because Republicans have been closely aligned with the Trump administration. So we'll have to see if anything gets in there. But there's also this matter of federal money for just regular state agency operations and programs that is now kind of caught up in limbo. The governor said that they're still pressing for the federal government to back off some of these funding freezes that had been put in place over the past few months.
Our colleague, political reporter Dana Ferguson, was there in the room for this news conference there with Governor Walz. And Dana, we heard you ask a question there at the end. But for a lot of people listening today, we haven't seen actions necessarily match words over the last couple of months. But what stood out to you in what the governor just said?
Yeah, it stood out to me that he made note of the fact that while this is good news, it's hard to erase what's happened over the past 2.5 months, and that folks certainly won't forget that. He said he's really proud of the state of Minnesota for showing the country who folks are, standing up for immigrant neighbors, supporting one another, and trying to make sure that constitutional rights are being honored here. We heard him talk about the fact that now starts the recovery phase, that it'll be up to lawmakers to start talking about funding to go out to small businesses. And there's some amount that's going to be available right away. He noted that it's not as much as he would like, and it doesn't make businesses whole after what they've gone through the last several weeks, with folks not feeling comfortable coming to work or customers not feeling safe coming out and shopping or dining. So we'll have to see what comes next and if there's anything that can get through the very narrowly divided legislature.
And Dana, we also heard from the DEED Commissioner, Matt Verelik, the Employment and Economic Development Commissioner, just bringing home the fact that so many businesses saw so much financial ruin. And then we also heard from the owner of a grocery store in St. Paul describing, and at one point holding up his passport and his whistle to sort of explain what life has been like. What do you think was the point of having all those folks stand behind the governor and talk about this economic ruin?
Yeah, I think it helps people really understand and see the faces of their neighbors who are being impacted by this immigration enforcement operation that's been here, and just the unintended consequences that come with it, that folks are feeling unsafe, that as we heard from that business owner, that he has to carry his documentation with him because he doesn't want to get pulled over or have a federal officer come into his store and apprehend him and not have that documentation with him. So just very visual reminders of what's been going on the ground, and that folks, people of color, Latino people, have felt really unsafe the last few months.
Dana, to the underlying point of your question, there's already people wondering, what did Governor Walz or others give away? And the governor seemed to kind of toe a very delicate line there, saying that quote, in very Trumpian fashion, they needed to save face, and they're playing up what they saw, the Trump administration saw as successes of this immigration action. But the governor is also worried perhaps about provoking continued problems. Is that what I'm picking up on?
Right. He essentially said that the state's not changed anything in terms of what it's doing. The Department of Corrections has been handing over folks who are on this list of the worst offenders that the federal government's been looking for, and they dispute claims to the contrary that have come down from the Trump administration. There's been some disagreement about how many jails, county jails, are cooperating with ICE, and I think that issue still remains a little bit. We heard from Homan that now they're at 100% that are willing to cooperate. I think we'll learn more about that as the day goes on. But the governor noted, too, that he doesn't want to provoke any sort of negative reaction from the president or from others in immigration enforcement because they don't want the surge to stay or to be surged up even more than it is.
And one thing I have in my notes here too, Dana, Governor Walz says that we all need to stay hyper vigilant right now in the days and weeks to come during this drawdown, saying he doesn't want to see, something happen that could create a setback. And I think, a lot of people feel that it's still a very tense and fragile situation right now.
Yeah, and I think there's a reasonable amount of skepticism about, okay, we can hear something come from federal officials or state officials, and folks want to see evidence of that on the ground. And so until there is meaningful evidence that these agents are leaving and have gone somewhere else, I think that Minnesotans are going to have questions.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be here to ask questions as well and bring to our listeners everything that is happening with the new developments. I want to thank the two members of our politics team joining us right now and continue this conversation with our listeners. Brian Bakst, Dana Ferguson, I know you've got work to do. I'm going to let you get back to work and talk to some more guests and bring in phone calls from our listeners. If you're just joining us, I'm Angela Davis, and we're talking about an announcement, a news conference just after 8 o'clock this morning where Tom Homan, the White House border czar, said the words that many Minnesotans have been waiting to hear, that Operation Metro Surge is concluding. It's coming to an end soon, but still, maybe there's some relief, but still a lot of questions, a lot of just uncertainty about what the days or weeks or months ahead will bring, an acknowledgement of how much harm has already been done here across the state to families, to businesses, to children. Events that have been canceled, 2 people shot and killed by federal agents. So right now, I want to continue to take phone calls as we do in the 9 o'clock hour. I want to hear from you about this news, of what will soon be the end of Operation Metro Surge, these thousands of federal agents leaving our state. Taking your phone calls. I want you to pick up the phone and call in. What do you make of this announcement? Were you watching or listening to that news conference just after 8 o'clock this morning as border czar Tom Homan made that announcement announcement. What do you remember about that moment? You can call us at 651-227-6000 or call us at 800-242-2828. Let's take some phone calls from people who've been holding on for a long time. So first, I'm going to take this call from a listener in St. Paul. This is Aaron, who is on the phone. Aaron, are you still there with us?
I'm still here.
Thank you, Aaron, for your patience. It sounds like you've been listening to the news conferences all morning long. What are you feeling or thinking right now, Aaron?
Thank you for your time. I feel a very guarded sense of relief, but the main thing is I desperately need our leaders and folks in the streets to be talking about accountability for the long term, not just for the killers, but for the people that gave the orders and that encouraged this lawlessness. I mean, we know that they're defying court orders, right? Their attorneys are admitting that and having breakdowns in court. If we want these things to change and we want to stay safe and keep our families safe and to keep this from ever happening again, are we going to stay out there and keep pushing for the people who did this to us to be answerable for what they've done? And I beg everyone listening to stay informed and to stay engaged, or it's not going to happen. We really have to fight them on this. We have to push for accountability. There must be consequences for their actions, for the people at the top in charge, not just for the killers that did this to us on the streets.
Aaron, it feels like a long road ahead, doesn't it? Like just the days, weeks, months ahead.
It does. I'm already struggling, to be honest, but I take incredible solace from the fire that they've lit in all of us. I mean, the way people came out in those incredible cold days in January for those marches, the way they keep showing up for their neighbors, bringing groceries, going on Ice Watch. We really care about each other, and that keeps the fire lit inside of me. That gives me hope that we can stay engaged in the long term.
We need hope. Thank you. Aaron in St. Paul calling in 651-227-6000 or call us at 800-242-2828. I want to hear what's on your mind. A guest I want to bring in who's also been so patient this morning and holding on to participate in the conversation, a professor of history there at Augsburg University, Michael Lansing on the phone. Michael, you've studied the history of policing in Minneapolis. You're also the author of a forthcoming book, A Police State, Politics and Policing in Minneapolis. You got a lot to write about. What sits with you as now we've just heard from the governor talking about being cautiously optimistic? I mean, we've got a lot of trust issues here to address in Minnesota.
Yeah, to say the least, both the last caller and the governor are pointing us towards something really important, which is that today may as much be a beginning as it is an end. And the days and weeks and months ahead are going to bring their own sets of challenges, the economic challenges that the governor and his guests were talking about, but also political challenges, social challenges, psychological and emotional challenges, that this is the beginning of a long road. And then, of course, there's this question of accountability. And that's really significant, especially in a city like Minneapolis that has had such a sordid history of police misconduct. And so I think it's not an accident that all these things are on people's minds right now.
And moving forward, I mean, we had been accustomed to cooperation between, city, state, and federal government, but we now don't know what to expect moving forward.
Well, we do have to be thinking about what happens next at the national level. Like right now, some of our state officials, our top elected officials from Minnesota, are in front of a Senate committee in the middle of a hearing about the very issue of what is the future of ICE. And I think even the governor pointed us towards this when he suggested, we don't know where ICE is going next. But I think many Minnesotans do not want to see what happened here be repeated in other parts of the country. And that's a really important commitment
to
for
witness.
Minnesotans to have, but also difficult to do.
Right. I'm imagining that. And we've known, before Minneapolis and St. Paul, we saw, the raids and protests in other cities. And so I'm imagining, too, trying to watch what played out in Minnesota happen in other states would be very difficult for people.
Oh, very much so. very much so. Difficult for those people on the ground, but also difficult for people here if those images are repeated yet again in our social media feeds and on our screens.
All right. That's Michael Lansing, a professor of history there at Augsburg University in Minneapolis. Thank you for your time, Michael. Again, call us at 651-227-6000 or 800-242-2828. I want to know how you're thinking about the news today that the federal government is saying that Operation Metro Surge is coming to an end soon here in Minnesota, meaning that those thousands of federal immigration enforcement officers and Border Patrol officers are leaving the state. A significant number of them have already left, many more leaving in the days ahead. What do you remember about listening or watching these news conferences this morning? What do you think about this and the road ahead? 651-227-6000. On the line right now, Superintendent of Fridley Public Schools, Brenda Lewis. Brenda, you've been a guest on my show recently talking about the impact on schools and students. You stood next to Governor Walz in a news conference also talking about what we've witnessed happen on school grounds and neighborhoods around schools. What are your thoughts this morning?
Good morning, Angela. Thanks for having me on. I'm optimistic but cautious. So this is a moment that we've been waiting for several weeks and months here. I do want to echo what the governor said and so many others. There are real plausible damages that have happened, that have upended many school districts throughout Minnesota. And that's what we really need to focus on now is just that recovery, mental health supports, academic supports, bringing safety back into our schools. It is not normal that it's become normalized for our children to literally talk about ICE every day, for our children to talk with their teachers and trusted adults in our schools about a family member being taken by ICE. And this is going to be a long road to recover, but I'm so thankful that we are to this place. I just want to make sure that like the pre-surge levels is very, very soon here so that we can really begin our rebuild.
Brenda, for people who aren't fully aware, talk about what children witnessed. I mean, they witnessed the absence of classmates and teachers, but what did they actually see and experience and were able to share with you?
Yeah, so we would see children that would be arriving at school whose mother had been followed by 2 ICE vehicles, and these are children that are of families that are here legally in Minnesota. We had children that witnessed ICE vehicles circling our roundabout on their way to school, preventing crossing guards from being able to cross them. We have children that witnessed 6 ICE vehicles up and down the street during arrival. We had children that witnessed their principal being yelled and screamed at by 4 ICE agents. We still don't know why that happened. We had children coming to school to not know if their friend or classmate was going to be in school. Conversations were literally, including in my own household, oh, so-and-so hasn't been in school for 3 days. They're not responding to their SNAP. I wonder if they've been detained. That's literally the reality, walking through hallways that aren't crowded anymore, which personally, I can't tell you how much I miss our hallways being crowded, our children being terrified to go home to an empty house, our children not able to leave their homes and experiencing school through virtual learning. Those are just a few items.
And schools also became food banks across the Twin Cities where people would bring in food donations for families that were not leaving the home. And then volunteers, I think you told me, were taking groceries to families.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So just one of the many pieces here is how much our community just was there for our students, our staff, and our families. So to your point, our social workers stood up food and supply deliveries groceries, diapers, formula, all the things to bring to our families on a very regular basis. Those were also included when our families signed up for virtual learning, helping with rental assistance, helping with utilities for families that either lost their jobs or were no longer able to work. So our public schools have been serving now in a way of really providing daily life supports to our children, our families, and the greater community.
That's Brenda Lewis, Superintendent of Fridley Public Schools. Thank you for your time as Superintendent.
You're welcome.
Phone line still open. Call us at 651-227-6000 or 800-242-2828 as we listen to you, hear from you, your thoughts on the announcement that Operation Metro Surge here in Minnesota is coming to an end soon. 651-227-6000. Let's talk to a listener in Minneapolis now on the line right now. What did you want to share with us?
Hello?
Yep, go ahead. I can hear you.
Yes, we are left with picking up the pieces, and the most impact is going to be on public schools because of student enrollment is going to be down, already is, and students won't be coming back, and that will affect the next school year as bad as it is now. It's just going to get worse. I have two children in
Are you still there?
Minneapolis public schools, and talking to them and talking to parents of other elementary school children, it's just heartbreaking what they have to go through, and some kindergartners learned what's going on in the city from teachers, not from the parents, because parents try to shield them from what's going on outside of their home and school. And then parents wish they would have said something to their children, but they were just trying, like I said, not to get too much into the little heads and explain of what's going on.
It's hard. Certainly an interruption in learning, right, for the kids. There's been a huge disruption.
Just not seeing
Thank you.
not seeing their peers. All of a sudden, there's a...
Let's take another phone call in a different part of the state, in Pequot Lakes, in Crow Wing County. Jill is on the phone. And Jill, what are your thoughts this morning as we all get our heads around this news that things may be changing here in terms of Operation Metro Surge and changing soon?
Sure. So when we heard the governor say trust but verify, I think that's generous. It feels like a generous sentiment to me. I'm concerned about the 287G agreements around the state with the county jails that have been, those agreements that have been made with sheriffs rather than county commissioners, the people that we the people elected to make those decisions with our tax dollars. And I'm concerned that we are going to see a surge in the counties, continued surge with ICE detentions in the counties that have those agreements. Yeah, I feel like today... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we heard Tom Homan in a news conference talking about greater cooperation with jails. But, what are your thoughts? I mean, it seems like something needs to happen to create change. But your concerns is that that there'll be an abuse of power in this?
Yeah, a continued abuse of power. We have seen zero due process for people being detained. And so if the big spotlight is taken off of Minneapolis and it continues to grow in other parts of the state as it has been, what's the difference? It feels like today is partisan theatrics, so that when the vote on the federal level for funding for this comes up tomorrow, that people can hold their nose and vote in favor of continuing funding for these activities and to build detention centers across the state and nation to continue holding people without due process and inhumane ways, as we see in the Whipple building now.
That's Jill there in Pequot Lakes there in Crow Wing County. Thank you for listening this morning, Jill. Call us at 651-227-6000. Share your thoughts on the news today that Operation Metro Surge is coming to an end soon here in Minnesota. In Maplewood, I want to talk to Eric. Eric, thank you for calling in. What's on your mind?
Hi, Angela. My main concern is we're not seeing enough reporting on the constitutional and human rights abuses that the federal agents have been causing throughout the state. And actually, we've seen it even before they've come to the state, where they were grabbing people at their immigration hearings and that kind of thing. They're going through the legal process. When immigration attorneys were interviewed outside of Whipple, they were saying that people being detained were not getting their phone calls that they were supposed to. And if they're released, all of their belongings have been taken from them, not returned. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I fully agree with what Tim Walz said, and I am encouraged by the news today. But I mean, we're all cautiously optimistic, and I want to see some accountability. I mean, who polices the federal authorities?
Again, taking your phone calls, 651-227-6000 or 800-242-2828 as we talk about and sort of process all the news today with Minnesota being at sort of the center of national news for the last couple of months with the beginning of Operation Metro Surge. Thousands of federal agents descending upon our state, detaining and deporting people. Give us a call and let us know how you're thinking. In Columbia Heights right now, we want to talk with the superintendent of Columbia Heights Public Schools, Zina Stenvik. And good morning to you, Superintendent.
Good morning, Angela.
Hi, you've been doing a lot of interviews. Just to remind people, your school district is the one where a lot of people may have become familiar with a 5-year-old, a preschooler. He and his father were detained, flown to Texas, now back home. I'm talking about little Liam. First, yes. What can you tell us about Liam and his family and how they're doing?
You know, they are still in the process of caring for Liam and his brother and coming back together as a family. So they're, it's very difficult, these traumatic experiences that they've gone through. So, we're in contact with the family and providing and offers of support in multiple ways that we can in terms of mental health support, medical support that we can offer through the schools. I'd be remiss to not mention that we have 6 other children who were also detained, 2 of whom continue to be at the Dilley Center in Texas.
What are your thoughts? Were you listening this morning? Were you able to listen live to the news conference this morning? Or tell us about, where you were when you heard the news that these federal agents may be leaving, all of them, very soon.
Yes, I was able to hear the remarks from Mr. Homan. So I welcome a drawdown. I definitely would welcome that. That's something we've been asking for, a peaceful resolution. As of yesterday afternoon or after school, we still had very strong and high ICE activity in our school district, including at dismissal time, ICE agents outside of our elementary building, across the street, driving around our schools. So we've not yet seen a decrease in ICE activity in our school community, but we would welcome that.
And you had several children from your school district that were taken from their homes. And tell me again about the impact on their families and their classmates, because this doesn't just happen to a family, it happens to a whole community when it occurs.
Yeah, so many of them were on their way to school when they were taken, or coming home from school, or in the morning at home getting ready for school. And then we did have one parent detained at their immigration appointment at the immigration office. So this is having a major impact on all of the children in our district. So obviously the children who have been detained are going to be traumatized for many years to come, and we will provide as much support as we can for them. But we're also seeing children who have not been detained, but who are not able to come to school right now and are learning online.
Mm-hmm.
This is impacting them. It's impacting the children who are coming to school, who are fearful of, could this happen to me as well? So all of our children and, frankly, all of our staff members, we've got many BIPOC staff who are carrying their passports on a daily basis now to and from work.
Mm-hmm.
So the fear is pervasive. And I would say the sentiment right now and the feelings after hearing the press conference is, in our community at least, this Operation Surge has not made the community safer, quite the opposite. But we definitely welcome a drawdown, and we'd like to get back to the business of repairing all of the harm that has happened in our community.
And get back to that focus on learning in schools. Thank you, Superintendent Stenvik, for your time. Again, call us at 651-227-6000. I want to hear how you're thinking this morning. Let's take another phone call. In St. Paul, I believe, we've got one of the instructors, in fact, the chair of the history department at McAllister College in St. Paul, Duchess Harris. Good morning, Duchess. Thank you for your time. And what do you want to share with everyone as we start to process what has happened here the last couple of months and what the road ahead looks like? What were your thoughts when you heard that this may be ending and soon, Duchess?
I think the road ahead looks like a reconciliation process. I think we need to have a public conversation about immigration enforcement, policing, protest response, community trauma, which is so critical to what we've experienced since 2020, and also what are the racial inequities that are impacted by all of this. And so I think as we move forward, we need some public testimony from families that have been impacted, and we need some policies about how we can address this.
You're on a college campus. What are you seeing? What have you been seeing over the last few months with students? I know they were probably gone for a break for a while, but how are students talking about this on campus?
Well, a lot of this started before we returned, and then we had a concerted effort of picking students up from the airport and getting them settled in. And all of our buildings are locked so that you need McAllister ID. And students have been receiving a lot of support, particularly from student affairs, but faculty as well, with their coping mechanisms of what it feels like to be in the metro area at this time.
It's a historical moment in Minnesota history. So they're living through a time that it's going to be significant that they'll continue to be talking about in the years ahead.
I mean, so much so. I'm actually team teaching a course with Professor Julie Dolan where we are looking at the troubles in Northern Ireland and how they were influenced by the strategies of the Southern Civil Rights Movement. And the parallels are uncanny. And as we read what the strategies were in the 1960s, we realize how informed we are by that now.
Right. This moment right now, Duchess Harris there at McAllister College, history professor there, chair of the history department. Thank you, Duchess. I want to get one last call in before our time is up in Minneapolis. Nick is on the phone. And Nick, I understand that you are a therapist.
Yes. Good morning, Angela. Thank you for this opportunity.
Hi, Nick. We just have a minute here. I just want to let you know we just have a minute here, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah. Yes, we've been affected by the surge. There's been a snowballing effect of trauma since George Floyd and the pandemic. The community hasn't recovered from the pandemic, 2020 trauma. Now this is snowballing. So I have developed a group therapy cohort for people that are affected by community violence. And we can provide that information if you'd like on your website. But we're still working through trauma from 5 years ago.
So encouraging conversation, listening to each other and being in community. I think that's something we can all agree on. This has been live special coverage here on NPR News. Go to nprnews.org. Stream us at any time. Check us out on our website, our social media feeds. We will keep you updated live on the radio as well. You won't miss a thing. Thank you for your time this morning. And Nina Morney is in at noon for more live coverage on today's developments.
Support comes from Franklin Center. For neurodiverse people ages 4 to 28, Franklin Center provides integrated educational, behavioral, and mental health services. Academy and adult program enrollment is currently open. franklinmn.org.
I'm Kimberly Adams, Senior Washington Correspondent for Marketplace. The Journal